This program is made possible through the effort of Arani National High School Main English Cluster in cooperation with the Art Teatro community.
We would like to thank the following personalities and institutions: Sir Ben Loory, Miss Aimee Morales, Sir Ramil Gulle, Sir Audie Roque, Mr. Richard Acola, Miss Arlene Samonte, Miss Arlene Matilde, Miss Vina Cunanan, Miss Susan Claire Agbayani, Miss Gina Lumawig, Miss Beverly Sy, Undersecretary Elaine Pasqua, Seasonal Writer M&J, Cultural Center of the Philippine Batang Sining, and CCP Intertextual Division.
I read.
I read. I read.
I read. I read.
I read.
I read. I read.
I read.
I lead. Let us prepare ourselves for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, to be followed by the invocation and the singing of ONHS-Main.
Heavenly Father, we bless and adore your almighty name. We thank you for the beauty and glory of your creation. We come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin our program. Send forth your Holy Spirit upon us to help us engage in active listening and participation, fulfill our vision, and succeed in our work. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we commit to positively impact the lives of our students, staff, faculty, alumni, and friends of Arani National High School, Maine. May we grow closer as a family and nurture the bonds of our community, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you and the service of humanity. May all we do begin from you, and through you be happily ended. We ask these things in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Mabuhay ang ONHS, paalala ng bayan. Guro at magulang, nagmamahalan. Kapit-bisig sa pagmumong sa kapatahan.
warmly welcome you in today's program. Let us hear a short message from the department head of the English cluster, Miss Vina Cunanan.
Good morning, our dear stakeholders at Araw National High School, Main. We welcome you all to the Araw Ng Pagbasa, the annual culminating activity of the National Reading Month. This year, we are featuring guest speakers, both local and international, who are acclaimed writers and book authors. We also showcase our students' creativity and participation in the various activities that promote reading and literacy and uphold our heritage and values. With this, we foster a love of reading among our students and make it a shared experience for all amidst our current circumstances. Reading together makes us truly believe that there is indeed hope in reading. Let us always remember, sa pagbasa, may pag-asa. Once again, welcome to ONHS-Main's Araw ng Pagbasa. Thank you and good morning.
Words have power. Today, let the power of words be maximized. To give her special remarks, please welcome the school principal of Orani National High School, Main, Miss Arlene Matilde.
Good day, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate the English department, headed by their department head, Ma'am Vina Cunanan, for having various activities in line with the celebration of the National Reading Month and Araw ng Pagbasa amidst COVID-19 pandemic. Salamat sa mga guro na patuloy na nagsisikap at nag-iisip ng mga paraan upang maihatid sa ating mga mag-aaral ang kalidad ng edukasyon sa bagong normal na paraan ng pagkatuto. Ganoon din sa ating mga magulang at mga mag-aaral sa pakikiisa at pakikipagtulungan sa pagmamahal sa pagbasa. As Mark Twain said, "The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read." So just keep on reading good books and reading materials of your interest. Again, congratulations and mabuhay.
Once upon a time. Look at that. Isn't that remarkable?
No one's gonna believe this. How come you look like that?
Like what?
Like you were mine.
Yes, but I love it.
He buys umbrellas and belts and pretty flowers and couches.
Once upon a time, a man went to China.
We're gonna have to jump.
I'll be right back.
It was calm and very quiet.
I did it to get someone's attention.
I don't know, I'm not a Martian.
Everyone waves.
If you're out there, and I hope you are, I just want to say it.
Damn you, death. Die, die,
And there's something else. There's something I want everyone to know.
Thank God that's over. Now I can go back to my life.
Happening now, short story discussions by Sir Ben Loory. Next and later.
Ben Loory is the author of the collections Tales of Falling and Flying and Stories for Nighttime and Some for the Day, as well as a picture book for children, The Baseball Player and the Walrus. His fables and tales have appeared in The New Yorker, Fairy Tale Review, Tom Magazine, Electric Literature, and A Public Space, and been anthologized in the New Voices of Fantasy and Year's Best Weird Fiction. They have also appeared on This American Life, and selected shorts have been adapted to short film, live theater, chamber music, and dance, and been translated into many languages, including Arabic, Farsi, Japanese, and Indonesian. Ben Loory is a graduate of Harvard University and holds an MFA in screenwriting from the American Film Institute. He lives in Los Angeles and teaches short story writing at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. Let's all welcome Ben Loory.
So, good morning, everyone, and wherever you are in the world, we hope that you're having a wonderful day. Welcome you all to Orani National High School, and we are here in the celebration of Araw Ng Pagbasa. In English, it is Day of Reading. And in this first segment, we are featuring Ben Loory, the author of the books Stories for Nighttime and Some for the Day, and Tales of Falling and Flying, as well as a picture book for children, The Baseball Player and the Walrus. His fables and tales have appeared in The New Yorker, Tin House, Fairy Tale Review, and Read Magazine. He has also been heard on This American Life and Selected Shorts. He is a graduate of Harvard and the American Film Institute and currently lives in Los Angeles, where he is an instructor for the UCLA Extension Writers Program. Now let's all welcome to the Philippines, ladies and gentlemen, our dear friend, Ben Loory.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's good to see you all.
Okay, so Ben, how are you? And welcome to Orani National High School.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm doing well. Yes, I'm just concerned about my internet, but I'm sure it'll be okay.
Okay, so that's great. And I won't keep everyone waiting because I know they want to hear a lot from you. So let's jump right in. Reading your stories always give us a whimsical kind of feel. Like I've read some of your stories with my students before, and they kind of open a world of fantasy among your readers. Now, you have 3 books under your name, published by a major press, from Penguin, I think, and translated into other languages. Can you tell us more about these books and your experience publishing them?
Let's see, more about the books. Well, 2 of them are short story collections, each of which has 40 stories in them. And then the third one was a picture book for children. That's The Baseball Player and the Walrus. And that third one, the picture book, was originally just one of the stories that I'd written for my first book that got turned into a picture book. So I don't really even think of them as, I don't really think in terms of the books that I write. I am definitely a short story writer. I write lots and lots of stories, and then eventually somebody lets me publish a book of them. So I jam a bunch of them together and send it off. I don't know what else I can tell you about the process of publishing the books. I've been writing short stories for, I think, 5 or 6 years before my first book was published. And I had been publishing individual stories for, I think, about 3 years by that point. Yes. The thing that finally got me a book published was having a story in the New Yorker, which is really sort of like anyone who writes short stories in America, that's sort of the goal, is to get a story in the New Yorker, because it's really the only magazine that people read short stories in on like a national basis. So that sort of gave me like the name recognition to finally have a book of stories put out. And if it hadn't been for that, I would probably just still be writing individual short stories and publishing them in small magazines, and still hoping to one day get to put out a book of stories. I don't know, what else can I tell you about that?
Okay, that's good for us. So among these stories that you have published, do you have your favorites among them?
Well, okay, so, my stories, they're sort of like my children, like I love them all for what's different about them,
Okay.
For a long time, I had a rule, which was that I wrote a story every day. Didn't have to be like a good story, you know. And it was just the first draft, but I insisted on writing a complete first draft of the story every single day. Just forced myself to get to the end of the story, no matter what it was. So as a result, I have like a lot of stories. I mean, I have like hundreds and hundreds of stories. And when Penguin bought my first book, it was supposed to be a book of 100 stories. That was the original manuscript. There was this gigantic book of 100, and they made me cut it down to 40. So already there, I had chosen like 100 out of the hundreds that I'd written, and then I narrowed it down to 40. So the stories that actually make it into my books those are already the cream of the crop. You know, those are already my favorites. So it's hard to choose amongst those. But I have favorites for different reasons and on different days. It's like my favorite scary story that I've written, and my favorite funny story, and my favorite one with an animal, and I don't know. So it's hard to pick an absolute favorite. But the one that always comes to mind is I wrote one about a man and a moose who go skydiving, and that one, it always makes me laugh. So.
Okay,
yeah.
that was a good one. Very inspiring as well as funny. Yes, and as I told you, I also have my favorite, which is The Girl in the Storm. I think I already told you this before, and whenever I read that story, I always feel inspired and motivated. So in your 2011 interview with Shane Jones, I hope you can still remember that, you talked about your outside influences that drives your work that is not a fable or a fairy tale. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I don't remember what I told Shane in 2011.
Yeah.
But let's see. I think that, I mean, a lot of what influences me, as you can probably tell from the Man and the Moose story, is cartoons. Yeah. I watched a lot of cartoons when I was little, and I've always loved cartoons. And also the Twilight Zone TV show. I don't know if you have the Twilight Zone in the Philippines, but it was like a black and white television show from the 60s that was a different story each episode. There were no recurring characters, but each episode was a different story, and they were usually sort of science fiction-y stories or scary stories, stories about alien saucers and things in the basement and people going through secret doors to other places. And so the Twilight Zone has always been like my favorite thing in the world. And I think a lot of what I do is I'm really just kind of writing for the Twilight Zone, even though it hasn't existed as a television show for 60 years now. So those are sort of the two big ones. There's also, there was a comic, not a comic book, but comic strip in the newspaper that was called The Far Side when I was growing up, which was just single panel cartoons that usually involved talking animals. It was by this guy named Gary Larson, and that was always very funny. And they sort of took a little while to get them. You would look at them and think for a while, and then you would kind of get the joke, but it took a long time sometimes. And that was often also about alien spaceships and UFOs. So yes, I've always had a thing about aliens and UFOs and strange stories. Let's see. Beyond that, what else? I don't know.
Do you think, because you mentioned about aliens and UFOs, and most of your stories are somehow out of this world, do you think that speculative fiction is the wave of the future, or will it lord over fiction that is traditional?
Oh, I don't really know what's going to happen in the future. I know that for me personally, I've only ever been interested in stories that are about strange events. From the time I was little, I was just always interested in ghosts, in, monsters, the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, and even looking back past, like before this century and before the 20th century, looking back over sort of the history of literature from the past, as far back as it goes, to me, it's always been about those kinds of things. Going back to ancient mythologies, they're always about gods and monsters and strange events. And, you read Homer's Iliad, the Odyssey, they're always about inexplicable things, or going to strange islands where different races of beings live. If you read Shakespeare, there's Hamlet's got ghosts in it, and there's witches in Macbeth, and pretty much any work of literature that I feel has survived over the thousands of years that we've been telling stories. It's always about strange, hard to explain events. I feel like that's just what people in general are interested in. I feel like realistic fiction, just sort of about people's day-to-day lives, is like a very new invention, something that nobody told stories like that up until maybe 200 years ago. It just, because nobody was interested. And then somehow over the past couple hundred years, people became more interested in it. But I still feel like people's natural inclination, when you want to hear a story, you want to hear something that makes you say, wow, something that's unexpected and that you haven't heard before. So I feel like that's always going to be around. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Okay, so having said that, what do you think of O. Henry? And is he still relevant to millennials?
O. Henry in America, I love O. Henry. And
yes, I love his last leaf.
Yeah, the Gift of the Magi is one of my favorites. Absolutely one of my favorite stories. O. Henry in America, people don't really talk about O. Henry. He's sort of seen as passé. He's sort of forgotten. They don't teach O. Henry in schools. People don't really read O. Henry. It's rare to find somebody who's read O. Henry. I don't know what he says to millennials. I don't know. I'm not a millennial, but he's a great storyteller. So I think those stories will stick around. People will always be discovering them. If you're interested in short stories, eventually you find O. Henry, I think.
Okay, that's fair. So, so in one of your interviews as well, you said that Sid Field's book on screenwriting changed your life. So I'd like to know, how did the film school, because you went to a film school, so how did the film school or being a screenwriter prepare you for writing fiction?
So before I started writing short stories, I was a screenwriter. After film school, I was a screenwriter for a while. And they're different things, writing screenplays and writing short stories. But the thing that writing screenplays does is it trains you to think in terms of events. It trains you to always describe things from the outside, to always be talking about what people are doing, where they're standing, what kind of expressions they have on their faces, what kind of gestures they're making, what they're saying. Whereas if you study creative writing, fiction, at least in America, it's mostly internal. People are mostly writing stories about people thinking through things, people remembering things. It mostly focuses on the interior of the characters. So a lot of American fiction is, as a result, like kind of static. the characters don't move around much. It's not like there aren't a lot of chase scenes in most American short stories. So the style that I write in is definitely influenced a lot by screenwriting, just because it's all seen from the outside. There's a lot of physical action. There's a lot of running around. There's a lot of fight scenes and people jumping out of airplanes and things like that. And I don't think I would be writing like that if I had gotten a degree in fiction writing instead of going to film school to study screenwriting. Yeah.
They say that writing short stories is more difficult, or I think complicated, than writing a novel. So do you agree with that?
Not for me. I think I've never written a novel, and I wouldn't know how to start. I mean, the idea of writing a novel, just spending years of your life writing one story is, I mean, I can't wrap my mind around that. That just seems impossible. I think every writer has different tendencies and different strengths and different weaknesses. And the novelists that I know tend to be very talkative people who just like to tell stories and will fill up as much time as you give them to talk. And so they don't have any trouble filling up those pages. And if you ask them to write a 3-page story, they'll just look at you like you're crazy, because why? Like how could they possibly, trim this story down to 2 or 3 pages? Whereas I don't like to talk. I generally am just completely silent unless somebody asks me a direct question. And when I'm writing a story, it's not like I'm trying to write short. I'm literally writing as much as I can. It's just that's what comes out. I write short stories because I just write very simply and kind of to the point. So when people tell me that writing short stories is harder than writing novels, that just tells me that that's a novelist speaking, right? Those are people who are just sort of naturally meant to write longer. I think that people who write short stories, it just seems like the natural form. I mean, the thing I always point out is that everybody, whether you're a writer or not, everybody, every day of your lives, you tell other people's stories. Like every time you talk to somebody, you tell them a story about something that happened to you that day, or something you saw on TV, or something somebody told you. And these stories that we tell each other they're short. You just tell somebody what happened. You try to make it kind of fun and entertaining and maybe sort of suspenseful, and try to have a bit of surprise somewhere along the way and make the end have a bit of a kick to it. But they're short stories, and that's just sort of the natural form that people have been telling stories to each other in as long as we've been human, I think. So it seems like it makes sense to me, but who knows?
Yeah, and it's very interesting how you write really short stories. Like I was comparing your shortest story, The Shadow, to the Bible, because in the Bible there is the shortest verse. And when I was teaching my students and I told them The Shadow, I just simply asked them to close their eyes and listen to the story, because I somehow memorize it, and then they're surprised whenever they hear the story, and I said, that's all. So could you please tell us the story behind that story?
There's no story behind that story. Every time I write a story, I do it the same way, which is that I sit down with a blank page and no idea what I'm about to do. And then I just think of the first thing that pops into mind, which is usually an image of some kind. Oftentimes it's like an object, or sometimes it's an animal, or whatever it is. And then I just sort of grab that first idea and I have the character interact with it, and then I just follow it to the end of the story. And usually that story goes on for a couple pages, but that story about the shadow, it only went 3 lines and then it ended. Like that was just it. It was just a 3-line story that just came out like that. And I don't know how that happened or why. And I love that story and I wish that I could write more like it. It's really a joke is what it is. Like not saying it's particularly funny, but that's just like a story in the form of a joke. And I don't know how to replicate it. I wish that I could write a whole book of those, but that's the only one I've ever done. And I don't really know how it happened. It just came out. I know that's not like a helpful answer, but it is.
Yes, and the mystery they hold is what makes them very interesting and spectacular in their own way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I think this would be my last question for now. So you are an author, and of course, you need readers as your audience. And I just have 2 final questions. Since we are celebrating the National Reading Month here in the Philippines, I'd like to know, how would you encourage young students in the Philippines to read, like our audiences right now? And what would your advice be to teachers to do to instill the love of reading among their students? Because I'm also a reading teacher, an English teacher here in the Philippines. So yeah, what would your advice be for us?
Well, that's a hard question. You know, the way, like I'd never really had a choice about reading because my family, we didn't have a television. My parents were both English teachers, and so all we had was like a house full of books when I was little. We lived far away from everybody else. And like all we did was read, like that was all there was. So I never knew there was anything else. So I've just always read from a young age, and I've never stopped or considered doing anything else. And so I don't like how to get people to read is sort of outside of my experience. I always feel like when I got into school, I felt like the problem in school was that teachers were always giving people the wrong books to read. They were always making us read very dreary, depressing, sad books about unhappy grown-ups living in kind of dystopian worlds where nothing ever went right. Like it was just miserable. They made us read miserable books, and then they didn't understand why nobody read the books that were assigned. Whereas there were just so many really great, wonderful, fun, scary, mysterious books out there that we could have been reading instead that people would have been interested in. So I feel like I think the main thing to get people to read is to allow them to read the things that they're interested in, and help them find those books that they might be interested in. You know, find out what kind of subjects students are interested in, and then get them to good books, fun books that they might enjoy about those subjects. And don't force them to read things they don't want to read, really. That's pretty much all I got on that, I think.
Yes, I really support you with that. And that's why I read your stories with them in the class, because they are very interesting. I recently read with them the Vatican, and they sort of made an analysis and answered questions about it. So I guess that's about it. As I said, those are my last few questions, but we will have more of them in the Q&A, and they will be delivered by the students if they have questions. But for now, let's hear some stories that you are willing to read for us. Yes, so I'll give you the floor.
Okay. Should I read the Girl in the Storm story?
I'd love to.
I'll read your Girl in the Storm story. Okay.
Yes.
Let's see. Girl in the Storm, 130. All right, the girl in the storm. There once was a girl who was lost in a storm. She wandered this way and that, trying to find a way home. But the sky was too dark and the rain too fierce. All the girl did was go in circles. Then, suddenly, there were arms around her. Strong arms, good strong arms. And they picked the girl up and carried her away. When she woke, she was lying in bed. It was a warm bed, very warm, by a roaring fire. The blankets were soft and she was dry. She looked around the room. There were paintings on the walls. There was a hot cup of tea on the nightstand. "Hello?" called the girl. "Hello? Hello?" A young man appeared in the doorway. He looked down at the girl with a kind, quiet smile. "Feel better?" he said, and she did. The girl stayed with the man for quite a long time, until she had all her strength back. "I guess it's time for me to go home," she said, and started to gather her clothes. But when she got to the door, she saw the rain was still falling. If anything, it was falling even harder. So she took off her clothes again and went back to bed and lay in the man's arms a little longer. This went on for many, many years, and eventually the girl grew very old. And then one day she discovered on the wall by the door the switch that turned the rain on and off. She stood there staring at the beautiful day outside and then down at the simple little switch. She listened as the birds flew by the window singing, and then she turned and went back to bed. In the night that night, the man woke up. "Did the rain stop?" he said. "I dreamt it did." And the girl put her arms around the man and held him tight. "It may have," she said, "but it's all right." Do you know, have you read the one about the rock eater?
I think I read about it, yeah, somewhere.
Okay, let's see. This is one from my second book, Tales of Falling and Flying.
Yeah.
All right, this is called The Rock Eater. I write a lot of stories about rocks for some reason. I don't know. All right, The Rock Eater. There once was a man who ate a rock. It was a small rock, nothing big. The man found it in a field and it was pretty, very pretty, and so he picked it up and he ate it. He wasn't in the habit of doing things like that. It surprised him as much as anyone. But there it was on that day, just lying in the field, the rock, the pretty rock, and so he ate it. The man felt great after he did it. It made him happy to have the rock inside him. It wasn't just the physical sensation of the rock, it was also something else. Somehow the man felt the rock made him better. Somehow he felt it improved him. It gave him a lift, more self-confidence. Somehow it positively changed him. And the man was very, very happy about it. And then he told his wife. "You did what?" said his wife. "You ate a rock?" The man explained to her how it had happened. "That's insane," said his wife. "You're lucky you're not dead." "It was just a rock," said the man. "It was hardly going to kill me." But after that, the man started to worry. He wandered around thinking about the rock. Should he not have eaten it? Could it really have done him harm? And what's more, could it really do him harm? He needed to talk to someone about it, but he was afraid all his friends would laugh. So he went downtown and wandered around and knocked on the door of the doctor. "How big was this rock?" the doctor said. The man held up his hands to indicate the size. "About this big," he said, "pretty small." Said the doctor and frowned. "What do you mean, the man said. "Is it dangerous?" "Well, I wouldn't say dangerous," the doctor said. "It's just, rocks can grow." "Grow?" the man said. He'd never heard of that. "Grow," said the doctor. "When you eat them, that is. Why, I once saw a woman with an 80-pound boulder in her gut. He shook his head. It wasn't pretty, he said. The man stared at the doctor. So what do I do, he finally said. It should probably come out, the doctor said. Out, said the man. You mean surgery? Do you really think that's necessary, he said. The decision is yours, of course, said the doctor, but personally I would recommend it. The man went home and thought about it. He told his wife what the doctor had said. You should never have eaten that rock to begin with. What did you expect, she said. That night the man lay thinking about the rock. He could still feel it there inside him. He could still feel its goodness radiating through him. I don't want to lose the rock, he said. Some time went by. The doctor called. I think I will keep the rock, the man said. Are you sure, said the doctor. Pretty sure, said the man. Well, said the doctor, it's your decision. If you ever change your mind, though, let me know. Okay, said the man, and that was that. More time went by. The man was happy. The rock felt good inside him. But there was one thing that was bothering the man. The rock was definitely growing. The man's stomach was getting bigger and bigger. It was starting to stick out. And the rock was getting heavier, too. The man was having a hard time standing up. And finally, one day, it got to the point where the man couldn't get out of bed. So what, said his wife, you're just going to lie there? I can't move, said the man. What do you want? This is all because of that dumb rock, his wife said. You should just get it cut out already. I don't want it cut out, the man said. It's my rock. It's my rock. I ate it. It makes me happy. Then the pain set in. The rock had grown so big it was crowding out the man's innards. You have to do it now, the man's wife said. You understand, you'll die if this keeps up. The man knew that his wife was right. He could feel the rock filling up his body. He could still feel the goodness of it in there somewhere, but it was buried now beneath the pain and fear. All right, the man said, go get the doctor. Finally, his wife said, and she did. The surgery was hard. The doctor needed 4 men just to lift the rock out. They placed it on a scale, but the scale was crushed and the weight of the rock was never recorded. Otherwise, everything went according to plan. They sewed the man's stomach back up. The doctor pronounced the procedure a success and had a cigar on the porch. Time went by as the man recuperated. Then one day he woke up feeling fine. He patted his stomach and got out of bed, took a breath, and headed toward the door. Where are you going? The man's wife said. For a walk, said the man. I feel great. The man went out and walked and walked. It was a nice day, and he felt the breeze and saw the clouds and heard the birds, and everything was absolutely wonderful. But after a while, the man started to feel different. He started to feel like something was wrong. He frowned and frowned, trying to figure it out. And then it hit him. It was the rock. The rock was gone. That was why he felt so hollow inside. There was a great big hole inside him. And the man wiped his brow and squinted and squirmed. And then the bad feeling got worse. In a panic, the man turned and ran to the field where he'd found the rock on that day so long ago. He looked around, all around, on the ground, everywhere, staring down, walking around in circles. Another rock will make me feel good again, he thought. Another rock will be just what I need. But he couldn't seem to find another rock like his. None of them looked right to him. Oh, there were lots of other rocks, of course, but they were dull and brown and covered with dirt. None of them looked like the right one for him. He ate some anyway, but they didn't work. What am I going to do, the man said. How am I supposed to live like this? And then it hit him, and he stopped and spun around. My rock, where is my rock, he said. The man ran frantically all the way home. Where is the rock, he screamed. What rock, said his wife. The rock, screamed the man. The rock, my rock. "Oh," said his wife, "it's out back. It was too heavy to carry very far." The man went out back. There it was, the rock, over in the corner of the yard. The man ran to it. He knelt down beside it. He wrapped his arms around the stone. He ran his hands all over its surface. He rubbed his face against it. It was way too big for him to eat, of course, but he held it, pressed it to his chest. "Oh, rock," he said, "how could I have been so stupid? And how can I get this empty feeling out?" And then the man heard a noise, and the rock cracked open, and he stared into its dark and hungry mouth.
Gosh. That's great. There you go, ladies and gents. Let's give a thumbs up and a virtual clap for Ben Loory. Those are really amazing, amazing stories, Ben, and we love reading them, and we can't get enough of them. So again, thank you for reading with us, or to us. I was just watching your story hour in Instagram before, and yet we are here now. So and now I think our students are ready for their questions for you. So are you guys ready? So for the first question, I think we have, please show your camera. Let's begin with Marian Joy. Yes, there she is.
Hello po. I am Marian Joy Salong. My question: when did you first realize you wanted to be a writer? Was it your childhood dream?
No, it wasn't. By the way, sorry, it's gotten really dark in here, and I don't have a brighter light, so I'm sorry I'm so hard to see right now. Let's see. So when I was little, I wanted to be an astronaut. You know, that was like the big thing for me. I wanted to go into outer space and fly around in a spaceship. And then when I got older, I wanted to be a film director. I wanted to make movies. And so I went to film school, and I became a screenwriter. And then screenwriting sort of took me into writing short stories, but I never saw it coming. When I was very little, I always kind of assumed that someday I would write a book, because that was just all that my parents ever talked about, and all we ever did when my sister and I were little was read. So I just thought that's like what people did when they grew up, was they wrote books. So I always assumed that somewhere in my life I would write a book. But I always assumed that it would be a novel, and I always assumed that it would be at some point like far in the future. I never saw myself writing short stories, and I never really saw it coming. It sort of happened accidentally. Yeah.
Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Marian. So we'll proceed to Renova's question, please.
Wala ko person kasi ano eh. Hello.
My name is Rina Cunanan, and this is my question. What is your work schedule like when you're writing? And do you have your rituals before, during, and after writing?
Let's see. My work schedule during writing and rituals that I have. So these change over time. I go through different phases, you know. When I first started writing, I was mostly nocturnal, like I was just writing at night. I would start writing around midnight, and then I would write until the sun came up, and then I would go to bed. And I would just write for hours and hours and hours, you know. I would write for like 6 to 8 hours at a stretch. Over time, that has changed, and nowadays I don't stay up all night as much, and I tend to write in shorter periods, like I only write for an hour or two at a time, more concentrated bursts. Sorry, there's a helicopter going over right now. In terms of like rituals that I have, and also I went through a period where I wrote in 20-minute sessions. I would set a timer for 20 minutes. This was when I was having like a hard time concentrating. So I would just say, I'm just going to write for 20 minutes. And I would set a timer and just sit down and write for 20 minutes. And I would do that 2 or 3 times a day. And if I felt like I wanted to keep going after the 20 minutes were up, I would keep going. But it was just a rule that I had to do 20 minutes, which isn't a lot. You know, a lot of times you can talk yourself out of writing by saying you don't have the time to do it or you don't feel like doing it today, but you always have 20 minutes. No matter how busy your day is, you can always find 20 minutes somewhere. So that was something that helped me break through periods where I wasn't writing or was just stuck or unhappy with what was happening in my writing or whatever. So it goes through different phases. Ritual-wise, I don't have a lot of rituals. I always make tea before I write. I drink coffee when I get up in the morning, but when I'm writing, I drink tea, and that's what I do when I am thinking, is I just get up and pour myself more tea, and then I go back to work. And I listen to, there's like one album that I've been listening to while I write. It's the only music I've ever listened to while I write, and I've been listening to it now for like 13 or 14 years, 15 years at this point. I just put it on repeat and I just listen. It's just this sort of minimalist piano music that doesn't really have because I can't listen to words when I'm writing because they distract me, and if things have too much of a melody, I get caught up in the melody. So it's just this sort of quiet piano music that helps me concentrate. That's pretty much it. Tea and piano music, and sometimes I eat some candy.
Okay, so thank you, Ben, and thank you, Renoa, for asking that question. Let's proceed to the next question. Let's proceed to Joseph.
I just want to ask, where do you get your information, ideas, or inspiration for your books?
Inspiration and information. I don't know if you're asking about information, but information, like I don't do any research at all. You know, a lot of writers do tons of information, of research up on what they're going to write about, and I don't do any research at all. Sometimes when I'm done with a story, I'll notice that there are some holes, there are things that don't make sense, and I feel like I have to find out some sort of information. Like I had to read up a little bit on dodos after I wrote the dodo story just to make sure I kind of understood what dodos were. Every now and then I'll write a story about a historical figure, and after I write the story, I go and read up on them to make sure I didn't get anything completely wrong, or to see if there are any other interesting details that I can sort of layer in. But I'm not a writer who writes with a lot of real world knowledge. You know, I pretty much draw everything from books that I've read in the past or just things that I've picked up along the way. In terms of inspiration, you know, I don't really know where these things come from. I write is always just down and then just sort of take whatever the first thing that comes to mind is. I found that if I spend a lot of time, like my rule is to never turn away an idea when it comes. Like whatever comes up, like that's sort of the homework assignment, and then I have to write a story about that. I find that if I start turning ideas away when they come to me, very quickly you just stop writing entirely, because you start judging every idea that comes to you, and they all sound kind of dumb when they first arrive. It's very easy to just say, no, that's stupid. Why would I write a story about a guy who eats a rock? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I write a story about a dodo? Like, it's so I've learned over time, you just have to kind of embrace the things that come into your mind, because that's what your mind is interested in for whatever reason. So don't judge your ideas. Just write the stories. Afterwards, if it's no good, you don't have to show it to anybody. You don't have to work on it anymore if you don't want to. But just writing whatever pops into your mind is kind of how I have found my way to do this. Inspiration, I'm never entirely sure what people mean by inspiration. For me, writing stories it's kind of like an emotional, like I just feel it as a need to write a story. That to me is inspiration, like I want to do it. That's the inspiration. The inspiration to me is not what the story is about or anything else. It's just the desire to write a story. So as long as you have that, like there's nothing stopping you. All you have to do is grab an idea. It doesn't even have to be a good one, and just write the story. The more you write, the more you will enjoy writing, and the more you will want to do it. So inspiration just kind of builds upon itself, and the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit, and the more it just sort of becomes a way of life. If you sit around and wait for like some angel to come down and say, now's the time, and here's what it's going to be about, and blah, 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 like that's just never going to happen. Like you just kind of have to do it. And I don't know if you have this phrase in the Philippines. In America, we have this phrase, fake it till you make it. You just kind of have to pretend like you know what you're doing, pretend like this is what you're here for, and then eventually it just sort of becomes the truth. So fake it till you make it it's a helpful slogan to keep in mind. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you, JSAT. That's wonderful, and I have a quotable quote: "Don't judge your ideas, just write your stories." Ben Loory. We got that from you. Okay, so up next is Jaslyn May Vergara.
Hello,
yeah,
po.
She goes.
Hello, I am Jaslyn, and how long does it take you to write a story?
Well, it depends. So there's like the process of writing the first. And well, first of all, I should say that every writer works in a different way. And so my process is different from most people that I know. But my process is I write a first draft very, very fast. Like I sit down and I write a first of the story. It usually doesn't take me more than 20 minutes. I'll just write as fast as I can. I don't worry a lot about, things right, your words right, or I'd be ugly and bad. Like I know it's bad as I'm writing it. I'm just trying to get the character, find like a problem that they're dealing with, follow them as they work through this problem, and try to get to the end of the story. And I just go as fast as I can, and I don't turn and I don't say no to ideas. Like whatever comes up, it's just sort of stream up this. Oh, and then this happens, and then this should happen, and then this should happen. What happens next? Maybe this. Like I just do what comes naturally and try to get to the end. And that usually takes me like 20 or 25 minutes. Then after that, then the work comes. And so that depends on, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes that first draft will be pretty good. This happens like maybe 1 out of every 100 times that I write a story. The first draft is just like, it's pretty good. And I'll go back through and change a few words and it's good to go. Like that's very rare, but it's wonderful when it happens. Usually what happens is after that first draft, I set it aside and I come back the next day and I read that first draft over, and immediately I start to see where it goes wrong, like, I don't get what's happening in this section. I don't know why the character is doing this. I feel like they should be doing this instead. And so then I start rewriting. And then eventually I get tired of working that day on that draft and I set it aside, and I come back the next day and I read over that draft and I do the same thing. It's not making sense here. And so I kind of just wake up every day and I read over the version of the story I worked on the day before. And usually the story just gets, from the beginning of the story, it just gets better and better. Day by day, and then eventually I get to the end of the story. And that process takes different amounts of time. Sometimes it takes like a week, sometimes it takes a month, sometimes a month like doesn't do it. The story's still not working after a month, and then I'll set it aside and I'll come back to it like a year later or 2 years later. My rule is that I never give up on a story. Like all the stories that I've ever started, like in my mind, I'm still working on them. Like maybe I'm not physically working on them, but one day, like I will come back to them. So there are some stories in my books that took me a day or two. There are some stories that took me like 10 or 15 drafts over a month. There are some stories that took me 40 or 50 or 60 drafts over like 5-6 years. There are some stories I've been working on for like 10 or 12 years, and I still don't know how they go. So it's a process. There's no rules to it. It can be frustrating. But on the other hand, like I'm always working on a bunch of different stories. So if I get stuck on one or I get bored on one, I just move over to another. So in my mind, I'm always working on like 20 or 30 stories at any given moment. Eventually, like one of them will click and I'll finish it, and then I'll move on to another one. So at any given moment, I'm just in the midst of dozens of stories, and some of them are approaching the end and some are just beginning. It's sort of a nightmare, but that's my process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Jaslyn. So we'll proceed to Christian Kiambao. Christian? There.
I'm Mr. Ben Loory. I'm Christian B. Kiambao, and here is my question. What was one of the most surprising things in creating or writing your books?
Surprising things to learn. That's a good question. I would say, that the thing that I learn over and over and over again, and I always forget, is that, when you're writing a story, you tend to see yourself as the main character. You tend to identify with the main character. And you want them to win. You want them to do well. You want them to solve their problems. There are usually other characters in the story who you see as sort of the bad guy, the villain, the problems feel like they're coming from that other person, those outside forces. And the thing that I learn over and over again writing stories is part of the process is always finding out what your main character is doing wrong. Like finding out where your main character is causing their own problems, where they're messing things up in their own life. And that's always the hardest thing to keep in mind, because you don't want to think that way about yourself. And you see your main character as yourself, and you don't want to think that the problems in your life are at least partially of your own doing. And I just learned that over and over writing the stories. Like I get like halfway through and I start to say, "What? I don't understand why the story isn't working. Like something's wrong. It's not it's not going anywhere. And then I realize, oh, it's because this character is not yet understanding that they are doing something wrong, that they're missing something important in their life or about themselves. And every time I get to that moment, it reminds me that these stories are about me in some way. So I'm just constantly learning over and over that I have to think more about myself and see myself more clearly and take responsibility for problems in my own life and work harder to fix my own problems. I know that's kind of like an abstract thing, but honestly, it happens to me every time I write a story. It's kind of sad. You'd think I would learn that and keep it in mind, but I never do.
All right, thank you po, Mr. Ben Loory. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are good words to live by. Yeah. So are we good? Kendall, are you?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
So you don't. Yes, there you go.
Hello, my name is Raylene Endal, and you can call me Ken. I have a question for you, Mr. Ben Loory. What do you like when you don't? What do you do when you don't write? When you're not writing something, or?
Yeah, what do I do when I'm not writing?
Yes.
Not a lot. The answer is, nothing too exciting. I read a lot. I watch a lot of movies. I teach writing classes and workshops. I spend a lot of time walking around the neighborhood. I have dinner with my girlfriend, and I look at a lot of pictures of her cats that she sends me on the phone. And that's pretty much it. Especially now with this coronavirus pandemic, like we don't leave the house much. Everybody's pretty much trapped indoors, just reading, watching movies, talking to people on the internet. So that's pretty much it. Yeah. Oh, wait.
Any more questions, Kendall, or we're good?
Thank you for the wonderful answer. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, it was wonderful. Now let's proceed to Alex Panogan. You're good.
Okay. Good morning, Sir Ben Loory. I'm Alex, and here's my questions for you. Aside from you have written, what is your favorite book or story, and why?
That I did not write, written by other people?
Yes. What is your favorite?
That's a really hard question. That's a really hard question. I mean, short story wise, there's a story by Tobias Wolff that's called Bullet in the Brain, which is, I think, maybe my favorite short story, which is about a literary critic who is in line at the bank when there is a bank robbery, and the bank robbers speak in cliches, like they've just been watching a lot of movies and reading a lot of books about bank robberies, and the literary critic just can't believe that these people are speaking in such cliches. Anyway, that's probably my favorite short story. My favorite book, there's a science fiction writer called Philip K. Dick, who's one of my favorite writers, and he has a book called Ubik, U-B-I-K, which was my favorite book for a long time. I don't know if I have a favorite book anymore, but that's probably the closest that I get to it. It's hard to describe, but if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, I think the Matrix is sort of stealing from Philip K. Dick a little bit. So, yeah, those are my two answers. I don't know. Tomorrow I would have two completely different answers, though. There's a lot of good books and good stories.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Have a nice day, sir.
You too.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. And let's proceed to Rancid Croix Fernandez.
Greetings, Sir Ben Loory. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is a classic question. What do you think makes a good story as a writer?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And there's a lot of answers, there's a lot of, wow, okay. Well, okay, so I think that a lot of things, first of all, it needs to be surprising to me. I know that sets me apart from some people who seem to like reading stories that are very about normal events and normal people, and I'm generally not interested in that. I tend to need something that I don't generally hear about. The more original it is, the better. The more it makes me say, wow, the more I like it. For me, a good story needs to have an emotional impact. At the end of the story, I need to feel something. And the more I feel, the better the story is to me. If the story is not reducing me to tears or giving me that sort of leaping feeling in my stomach, or sometimes it makes the hair on your arm stand up, or, I need to have a physical, emotional reaction to a story in order for me to think that is good, right? So there's that. I tend to need to see things in a story very clearly. A lot of people have sort of more abstract minds, and they don't need as much visual material, but I really need to be able to see what's going on. I need to see where the characters are, what they're moving through. I need to be able to visualize them, and if I can't do that, then the story, I'm not gonna care about the story. So I need to see things clearly. They need to emotionally affect me. I also feel like I need them to be surprising in some way. And I tend to feel like a story needs to have a sense of mystery about it. I like a story that when it's over, it keeps you thinking about it, right? There's something in the story that draws you back to it, something in it which makes you wonder, that maybe you don't fully understand, but feel like you're just on the cusp of understanding. Something you can think over and talk over with people. I feel like a story shouldn't give you answers, but should make you want to ask questions. Should make you want to think more about the story and about the world in general, about life and your life. So yeah, that's all I got right now.
Sure, sir. We thank you for everything you bring to the table, and I hope we'll meet again next time.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
So we'll have Jersey Morales up next.
Good day po, Sir Ben Loory. I am Jersey Morales, and this is my question. Do you have any suggestions to help me become a better writer? If so, what are they?
Well, there's really only two things, I think, in general, right? The first one is to read a lot. The first one is just read all the time. To be a writer, words have to just flow onto the page. You don't want to be spending a lot of time trying to think of ways, thinking of how to say the thing you're trying to say. You need to have things come to you like second nature. You just have to be able to sort of be swimming in words and language. So you just have to read all the time. Just read constantly and read as widely as you can, read all kinds of stories, read things by like current writers, read stories by old writers, read stories by people from other countries, from your own country, read stories, science fiction stories, and read realistic stories, and read romance novels. Just read everything. Learn all the different kinds of stories that people are writing, and then you can pull from that experience and pull from all that language that you've soaked up. So that's the first thing, and then the second thing is to write. Just to write all the time. And writing all the time is sort of the hard thing, especially in the beginning, because when you start out, you're probably not that good at it. Just like if you decide to play an instrument, like you don't know how to do it when you start, and you're not very good at it. So it's hard in the beginning, and you just have to keep going, try to write every day, write even when you're not having fun. Try to have fun, but even when it's not going well, just keep at it. And eventually over time you get better at it. And then, in a few years you're good at it. So those are like the two main things. Read a lot and write a lot. It's like annoying. It's annoying to have somebody tell you that, but that's pretty much all there is. In terms of writing short stories or any kind of stories, the only thing past that, I would say, is, just focus on a character. Focus on just finding a character. It doesn't even really matter who it is. Just take a character and sort of follow them around. Follow them about their normal day. Describe them as they're doing things. And then try to give them a problem. That's pretty much what short stories are. There's some person, they're trying to live their normal life, and then something happens. Something bad happens, something upsetting. There's a problem, and then they have to deal with it. That's pretty much any story you can imagine. So if you want to write something and you don't know what, just pick up a character, anybody. It can be literally anyone. Follow them about their normal day, and then find a way to give them a problem, and then see where it goes. Those three things are pretty much like all I know about writing. Like there are like little tricks here and there, but that's pretty much all there is. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, po, sir.
Sure.
Okay, so I still have one on my list, but I don't know if there will be an addition. So let's have Eula.
Hi, sir. I'm Eula Bernaldo, and this is my question. How do I write a good introduction and ending to my stories?
Introduction and ending. Okay, it's a good question. Endings, by the way, I have no idea. Like I don't know any trick to endings, and that's the hard part. And the only way I've ever found to write endings is just keep writing them, write an ending to the story. If it doesn't feel right, you write a different ending. If it doesn't feel right, you write a different ending. Just keep writing endings, and then eventually, hopefully, you find the right one. I would say with endings, the one thing to keep in mind is that when you get to the end of a story, usually a character has gained something and also lost something. You know, people tend to think about stories in terms of a character changing in some way, but I tend to think of them in terms of like a character exchanging something. Like they trade one thing for another thing. So they get something out of it, but they also lose something in the process. So when I get to the end of a story, I try to ask myself, okay, so after all this that this character has gone through, like what have they gained from the process? What good has come of it? And then also like, what have they sacrificed in order to get that? Because, you know, anything you do in life, like you can't have everything. Like everything is a choice. Everything is a trade-off. You know, if you win the lottery and you become a multi-millionaire overnight, like that's great. But you also lose some things, right? Suddenly everyone you know now is asking you for money. Suddenly you can't trust anyone anymore because now it's like everybody just wants to be your friend because they want some of the money that you won, right? There's like even in the best of situations, there's some kind of trade-off. So that's the main thing that I'm looking for at the end of a story. You know you're in trouble when you get to the end of a story and it's just like all bad or all good. You know, it's just like everything is wonderful. Like, you know, there's a lie there somewhere. And if everything is just all bad, it's like, no, like something good came from this. There was a trade-off somewhere. So I'm always looking for the trade-off at the end of the story. I also always try to end a story, you know, that the impulse at the end of the story is to just like talk a lot. You know, people tend to want to get very poetic at the end of the story and just sort of go on and on about like what this story has meant and how the character has dealt with all this and what happened to all these people in the years after the story ended. And you like tend to want to go out in like a blaze of words. So stories tend to get very fuzzy at the end. So I try to always think in terms of like, what is the last action that the character does? Give the character like a final gesture, a final thing that they're doing, a final line to say, and try and find like the last meaningful thing that that character does in the story. I try to end like that just because you want to end on the main character and not elsewhere, because the story is about the person. So you want to focus on the main character in the final moments. That's like all the helpful info I have about endings, which isn't much, I know. Beginnings, you know, introductions, I don't really think in terms of introductions. I tend to just dive right in. I tend to try to start with the character doing something, try to get into the action as fast as possible. I don't spend a lot of time describing the weather, you know, or the surroundings, where they are. I try to layer those things in along the way. I try to just get as quick as possible into the character, into their life, and get to the problem that they're facing as fast as possible. I don't waste a lot of time with the boring stuff. Try to get to the exciting stuff as quick as you can. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, but that's what I got.
Thank you, sir. Thank you po, sir.
Okay, so that's it. So there are more questions that are being raised in the GC, so I think I'll call, who's this? Shamel.
Good morning po, sir. I have some question po. What do you do when you have writer's block?
It's a good question, and I have some answers, but they don't always work, you know. Writer's block is real, and it's hard when it happens. I would say, like the main thing that's usually going on when you get writer's block is that you're just afraid. Writer's block happens when you start to think more about what's going to happen when the story is done, when your book is written, when somebody else reads it. A writer's block happens when you start to judge your own work, when you start to say, oh, I'm no good, this story is stupid, I'm never going to write anything that's any good, and nobody's ever going to publish this, I don't know why I'm doing it. And once you start doubting yourself and judging your work before it's even done, it's makes things really, really hard. So all the work there is finding ways to get around that. And the first thing to keep in mind is always that nobody ever has to read what you're writing. Whatever you're writing there in your notebook or on your computer or whatever, that's just between you and your computer, you and your notebook. You can write anything you want. Nobody ever has to read that. So it doesn't matter if it's bad. That's just whatever. So you just have to concentrate on why you're there. You're there because you want to do this. You're there because you have this story that you want to tell, or you enjoy telling stories, or you enjoy writing, whatever it is. Try to think about why you are there and what you enjoy, as opposed to what other people are going to say about it, or whether or not you think that it's any good. I mentioned this earlier, but the thing that really helped me with this was working quickly, not allowing yourself to edit as you write, leaving editing for later. Just sit down and say, I'm going to write a story, I'm going to start at the beginning, I'm going to go all the way through to the end, and I'm not going to stop, I'm not going to back up, I'm not going to delete anything, I'm not going to change anything. It just happens to this character from beginning to end, and then you just do it. And it's just a first draft. It doesn't matter. It's just, it'll take you 20 minutes, 25 minutes, however long it takes. And for me, I would set this timer for 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and the timer forces you to write fast. It forces you to not reread, to not look over the sentences, to not slow down and judge your own writing as you go. It forces you to work fast. So at my worst periods, when I had the worst writer's block, I would just do that, set that timer for 20 minutes and say, okay, maybe I am a terrible writer, but I'm going to write for 20 minutes right now. And then you just do it. And when it's done, there you go. You close the file, you don't ever have to look at it again if you don't want to. And then the next day you do it again. And then the next day you do it again. And those 20 minutes, eventually, you find your way back to enjoying it. You find your way back to reconnecting with why you're there. And eventually one of those 20-minute sessions, something will come out of that you like. Something will come out of it that you're like, oh, that's interesting. I want to keep working on that. I like that line of dialogue, or I like that character, or, I like that description of the shoe, or whatever it is. You can find something that will keep you going. So it's really just a matter of forcing yourself to actually put some words down on the page. Sometimes joining a writer's group, whether it's in a class, or if just some friends of yours, or some people you don't even know, some people you meet on the internet, and you all agree to meet in a Zoom room and not even talk, but just everybody sits there and writes for an hour. Just something so you are sort of forced into a situation where you actually have to write. That's really the only way through writer's block, is to force yourself to do it. Because as soon as you give up and you just don't write, it's very easy to just continue to not write. It's very easy to just let a week, a month, a year, 10 years go by without writing. And it's not that hard to force yourself to do it. And if you do force yourself, like, it usually kicks in pretty fast. It might take a week, might take 2 weeks, but it will come back. So yeah, that's all of my recommendations on writer's block. It's an unpleasant time. It's like a bad experience when it happens, but it happens to everybody. It doesn't mean you're not a writer when it happens. If anything, it means you are a writer, because that's a universal experience for writers. So maybe it's a good sign.
Yeah, so I think there are no more questions here. So thank you, Ben, for your time answering our questions and for joining us today. And since we've been talking about good endings and proper endings, I think we have reached the proper ending for this segment. And before we go to the next one, allow me to express our gratitude on behalf of Orani National High School, Maine, Orani, Bataan, Philippines. We would like to thank you, Ben Loory, for gracing our event with your presence and for responding to our invitation. Though I know that you are very busy, thank you for being here. We had a really great time with you, and hopefully we can still invite you in the future.
Thank you. I would love to come back anytime. It was really fun. Thank you all.
Thank you so much again. So do you have final words to this, kiddos, Ben, before we go?
I would just say, don't give up. I would just say that, writing is hard. It's hard for everybody. It's especially hard in the beginning. But if you keep going, eventually it gets easier. And there's really nothing better than telling stories. So keep at it if that's what you want to do.
I think that's a wrap. Okay, please stay with us as we are about to begin our next segment after this. See you.
Bye.
Okay.
Likha is a volunteer-led initiative advocating for community-based solutions in the Philippines. The group has an ongoing project to assist COVID-affected families. To send your support, visit the Likha Initiative Facebook page and look for Ms. Dabs Bertolo. Thank you.
Ms. Aimee Morales, with the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines, would like to invite you to a literary and publishing trade discussion. Learn about editing and proofreading in Filipino and English this afternoon at 1 p.m. Just visit the Facebook page of the National Book Development Board for more details.
Well, as an English teacher, when we were discussing about a story from the textbook, I always make it a point to discuss it or to tell the story in the most creative way that I could, so that their imaginations would work. In that way, they would realize that they could be in other places, meet other people by just reading.
One of my strategies is I ask my students what genre of movies they like to watch. Some said they like horror movies, and others said they love love stories. And then I asked them to share their favorite movies. And then for our agreement, I asked them to read a book of the same genre and be ready to share the best part of the story on our next meeting. My students enjoyed that activity. They enjoyed reading and sharing. And what is my point? Let us give our students reading materials or reading tasks that are of their interests. We must ensure that they will enjoy the tasks that we are going to give them.
As teachers, we are always looking ways to motivate our students to love reading. To inspire them, we need to relate the story or stories to their present situation, employ values to them, appreciate when they are reading, and share genres or different genres according to their interests.
I always mention the stories I have read, the books that I have read, the authors that I love to my students. Sometimes I would mention parts of the story that I think that would be more interesting to them. And sometimes they would say, Mom, can I borrow your book?
As a teacher, it is a fulfillment on my part to see improvements on my students' reading skills. That is why I am trying my best to use different reading strategies that are suited to their needs and interests. So I read with my students, I read aloud, and see to it that I use reading materials that they can relate to. With those strategies, my students somehow improve their reading skills.
To be a leader, you have to be a follower. First, be a reader and explore the different dimensions in reading. By that, you will get the gist. Next, listen to other stories and experiences in reading. By that action, you will become a true leader of readers.
Ballads of the Mother's Heart by Jose Labilla Tierra. The night was dark, for the moon was young, and the stars were asleep and rare. The clouds were thick, yet youth went out to see his maiden fair. Dear one, he pleaded as he knelt before her feet in tears. My love is true. Why you have kept me waiting all these years? The maiden looked at him, unmoved it seemed, and whispered low. Persistent youth, you have to prove by deeds your love is true. There's not a thing I will not do for you, beloved, said he. Then go, said she, to your mother dear, and bring her heart to me. Without another word, youth left and went to his mother dear. He opened her breast and took her heart, but he did not shed a tear. Then back to his maiden fair, he ran unmindful of the rain, but his feet slipped and he fell down, and loud he groaned with pain. Still in his hand he held the prize that would win his maiden hands. But he thought of his mother dear, so kind, so sweet, so fond. And then he heard a voice, not from his lips, but whole apart. Get up, it said. Were you her child? It was his mother's heart. Ballads of the Mother's Heart.
Ballad of a Mother's Heart by Jose Labilla Tierra. The night was dark, for the moon was young. The stars were asleep and rare. The clouds were thick, yet youth went out to see his maiden fair. Dear one, he pleaded as he knelt before her knees in tears. My love is true. Why you have kept me waiting all these years? The maiden looked at him, unmoved it seemed, and whispered low, persistent youth, you have to prove by deeds your love is true. There's not a thing I would not do for you, beloved, said he. Then go, said she, to your mother dear, and bring her heart to me. Without another word, youth left and went to his mother dear. He opened her breast and took her heart, but he did not shed a tear. Back to his maiden fair, he ran unmindful of the rain, but his feet slipped and he fell down, and loud he groaned with pain. Still in his hands he held the prize that would win his maiden's hand. But I thought of his mother dear, so kind, so sweet, so fond. And then he heard a voice, not from his lips, but all apart. Get up, it said. Were you hurt, child? It was his mother's heart. Ballad of a Mother's Heart. Ballad of a Mother's Heart by Jose Labilla Tierra. The night was dark, for the moon was young, and the stars were asleep and rare. The clouds were thick, yet youth went out to see his maiden fair. Dear one, he pleaded as he knelt before her feet in tears. My love is true. Why would you keep me waiting all these years? The maiden looked at him, unmoved it seemed, and whispered low. Persistent youth, you have to prove by deeds your love is true. There's not a thing I would not do for you, beloved, said he. Then go, said she, to your mother dear and bring her heart to me. Without other words, Youth left and went to his mother dear. He opened her breast and took her heart, but he did not shed a tear. Then back to his maiden fair, he ran unmindful of the rain. But his feet slipped, and he fell down, and loud he groaned with pain. Still in his hand he held the prize that would win his maiden's hand. But he thought of his mother dear, so kind, so sweet, so fond. And then he heard a voice, not from his lips, but all apart. Get up, it said. Were you hurt, child? It was his mother's heart.
Ballad of a Mother's Heart by Jose Tierra. The night was dark, for the moon was young, and the stars were asleep and rare. The clouds were thick, yet youth went out to see his maiden fair. Dear one, he pleaded as he knelt before her feet in tears. My love is true. Why you have kept me waiting all these years? The maiden looked at him, unmoved it seemed, and whispered low. Persistent youth, you have to prove by deeds. Your love is true. There's not a thing I would not do for you, beloved, he said. Then go, said she, to your mother dear, and bring her heart to me. Without another word, Youth left and went to his mother dear. He opened her breast and took her heart, but he did not shed a tear. Then back to his maiden fair. He ran unmindfully of the rain, but his feet slipped, and he fell down, and loud he groaned with pain. Still in his hands he held the prize that would win his maiden's hands. But he thought of his mother dear, so kind, so sweet, so fond. And then he heard a voice, not from his lips, but all apart. Get up, it said. Were you hurt, child? It was his mother's heart. Ballad of the Mother's Heart by Jose Tierra.
This program is made possible through the effort of Orani National High School Main English Cluster in cooperation with the Art Teatro community.
Happening now. Poetry Talk with Sir Ramil Gulle. Next and later.
Ramil Gulle is a journalist, poet, book author, and PR and marketing writer. In 2018, he won the Poet of the Year prize at the Nick Joaquin Literary Awards. He has also won awards at the Palanca Awards for Literature and served as judge a few times in the said competition. He is the author of 4 books of poetry, including Textual Relations and Poison Nostalgia. He also wrote on commission 1 tourism coffee table book and 2 biographies. He is also a creative writing coach and a vocal technique coach. Let's welcome Ramil Gulle.
Hello kids, hello everyone. I'm so happy that I was invited by Heart to speak, to talk to all of you about a topic that I really love, which is reading. Reading has been my favorite thing to do since I was a kid, no? Since I was a young kid. I started reading siguro mga 7, 8 years old. Yeah. And now I'm 47. So matagal na ako nagbabasa. Now, I'm gonna talk to you siguro Taglish na lang din, ano. I'll speak in English and then at some points I'll also speak in Tagalog. Okay naman siguro 'yon. So, because of this topic, I tried to recall some of the best books that I have read in my life. So marami siya. But I'm gonna focus on Filipino writers siguro because everyone, a lot of us who are studying, who have studied in the Philippines, we have more exposure to foreign authors pa rin compared to local authors. Although I would like to believe sa panahon ngayon, no, 40 years after mag-start magbasa, mayroon na ring mas malaking audience ang Filipino authors, especially online, thanks to platforms like Wattpad. But in the public school, I don't know. Kasi when I was in a public school, I was a public school student ng elementary. Syempre, walang internet noon. So what we had was a library. I don't know now anong status ng libraries in our public schools. I hope meron pa din, and I hope they are still well-stocked. At I hope kayo, yung mga umaattend ngayon, I hope you all can still find the time to go to the library and read for the pleasure of reading and the pleasure of learning. Kasi when you're a child, why do you read? Yun yung, I mean, if no one tells you to read, siguro hindi talaga tayo magbabasa. So we need our teachers, our friends, our fellow students to encourage us to read. Pero once we discover reading for ourselves, we will discover na reading itself is its own reward. Parang yan yung sabi nga nila, when you read, it's like traveling. If you want to go to Europe, you read a history book on Europe, or you go online, you go to any site that features France, any site that features Japan. And just by reading, para ka na rin pumunta, no? The important thing is we train our minds to read. Unfortunately, yun na nga, studies have shown na hindi talaga tumataas yung level yung dami ng nagbabasa at yung level ng skill and comprehension sa pagbabasa. Medyo hindi pa natin na-meet yung standard. Pero your generation, you have a say on that. Kasi it depends on you. Sino bang magbabasa? Di kayo din. No one is going to do your reading for you. So I hope slowly, on your own, at your own pace, you discover masaya pala magbasa. Bakit ba mahalaga magbasa? Just a few thoughts lang. Ano bang value ng reading? At least for me, the value is you learn things, and then lahat ng mababasa ninyo, lahat ng na-absorb ng utak ninyo when you read, lahat yan useful. Hindi nyo lang na masasabi ko, it might not be useful after a year, but someday, you will realize yung mga binasa nyo dati, yun rin ang tutulong sa buhay nyo when you are facing challenges. So, there's learning, taking information, and also there's what we call critical thinking, which is the most, for me, the most important part of reading, or the important aptitude that you need to develop when you read. Yung critical thinking, which is you apply logic, you apply reason, you don't believe everything that you read. When you read something on a topic, let's say ang topic is climate change, don't just read one book about climate change kasi iba-iba yung views, iba-iba yung data, iba-iba yung information. Merong mga naniniwala sa climate change, merong hindi naniniwala. Ako, I would tend to believe it kasi we are now experiencing climate change. Unfortunately, yung Cagayan, yung Isabela, yung Tigigaraw, right now, baha talaga sila, no? The worst flooding, yung Yolanda, all of that, climate change. So that is going to be a challenge. Climate change is going to be a challenge for your generation, more than ours. Kami, mamatay na kami. But kayo, you are facing that. So you have to read on it and you have to develop your critical thinking so that kung sino man yung government officials natin, kung sino man yung mga mayayaman sa society natin, we have to tell them, climate change, do something about it, diba? To save our lives. Anyway, that's just an example, no? When you read. Another value of reading, bukod sa learning, critical thinking, is you develop your imagination and your empathy. Okay? Imagination is important because without imagination, walang bago na mangyayari sa mundo. Before we had the internet, someone imagined the internet. Oh. And it's likely someone from the US military pa, no? Because it's really the US military that started the internet. So, sabihin, if you want to create good in the world, you have to imagine that good first. E pag hindi developed yung imagination ninyo, ang pagbabasa kasi parang workout yan eh. Workout yan for your minds. So, it works out your imagination so you can imagine good things and you can imagine how to make these good things come true. Oh, that's one thing. Another is empathy. What do you mean by empathy? Empathy is essentially yung parang golden rule yan eh. No? Yung sabi nga ni yung commandments ni Jesus Christ, which is to love God with all your heart, and then to all your heart, all your soul, and then to love your neighbor or to love other people as you love yourself. Yun ang empathy, because empathy helps us to see na kahit kaaway mo yan, tao rin yan. Dapat mo rin yan tulungan. Kahit if you have different beliefs, iba religion ni Pedro at ni Juan, pero if they have empathy, they have compassion, they see, we are both human beings, then they can work together. Pero pag wala tayong empathy, wala tayong compassion, magkakagulo ang mundo. We will all fight. We will all kill each other. So, kasama yan because when you read a book, sabi nga yung author, no, na si Stephen King, a book is like mental telepathy. Bakit? Because yung nasa isip ng writer, nalilipat sa isip mo. Di ba? So, yung connection na yun, that connection, that human connection, that's empathy because meron kang empathy between yourself and the author. You see yourselves as the same. And when you read, even if it's fiction, no? Let's say, although hindi ito book, let's say Star Wars or although yung mga uso ngayon na superheroes, they all started out as books. You know, the Avengers, Spider-Man, they all started out as books, no? Or comic books. So, when we see them, when we read them, feeling natin either tayo yung superhero or tayo yung tinutulungan ng superhero. Merong something inside us that identifies with these characters. Yung ganyan, it requires imagination and it requires empathy. So the more na nagbabasa ka, ang dami mong nadidevelop. Nadidevelop mo yung pagiging makatao mo. Nadidevelop mo yung malasakit mo, which is the empathy and the compassion. Nadidevelop mo yung imagination mo, and you develop your mind, no? Your learning, no? Which is your cognitive ability. Okay? So, yun pa lang, importante lahat yun. Pero, hindi mo pwedeng persahin ang sarili mo para i-enjoy lahat yun. You have to learn first, pick a book that you really like, and then, let's say, yung iba, no, there are other kids na they started out with Harry Potter. Eh, di ba ilang books ang Harry Potter? Sandusena ba yun? O 10? Ilang books ba yun? Pero tuloy-tuloy nilang binabasa yon. Okay na yon. Siyempre, as they grow older, maubos naman nila yung Harry Potter books. They have to go and read other books. Nangyari yan sa mga anak ko. Now, ang dami nilang binabasa, hindi lang Harry Potter, no? Beyond Harry Potter pa. So, sabihin, ang pagbabasa ay isang paglalakbay. Ha? Paglalakbay rin yan. Parte yan ng paglalakbay mo sa buhay mo. So, pag hindi ka nagbabasa, ang liit lang ng paglalakbay mo. Para bang, diyan ka lang naglalakbay, sa kalye mo lang. Pero pag nagbasa ka, yung buong mundo, yung buong kasaysayan ng mundo, malalakbay mo yan. At parang nutrition yan, parang sustansya yan. Mas lumalakas ang isip mo, mas may sustansya ka sa kaluluwa mo. So, di ba, walang dahilan para hindi tayo magbasa. Walang nakakasama sa pagbabasa. Okay? Gusto ko lang magpakita ng ilang mga aklat na nabasa ko na, pero medyo matanda na ako nung nabasa ko ng mga to. Pero I just want to point out certain things. For example, if you know this guy, si Lord Rivera, some of you probably na papanood sa TV. He's a musician, he's a TV personality, si Lord Rivera. Pero magaling na writer to. We were together sa University of Santo Tomas. Meron kaming writers group noon ng college. So si Lord ay ka-member noon, naging kaibigan ko, naging kumpare ko, naging ninong ng anak ko. Pero I just want to point out, ito libro niya ito, this is like his 4th or 5th book. Makatula ito, no? Si Lord, kahit sumikat na siya, naging musician siya, nasa TV na siya, endorser na siya ng mga itira na yan, yung Mang Juan. Endorser na siya, product endorser na siya. Hindi nawala sa kanya yung pagbabasa at pagsusulat. Dala pa rin niya, dahil mahalaga talaga yon sa tagumpay natin, sa pagiging tao natin, mahalaga yun. Tapos mapapansin nyo, yun, so kaibigan ko siya. Dahil kaibigan ko siya, sinusuportahan ko siya, binili ko yung libro niya. Hindi ko to hiningi sa kanya, binili ko to. Isa pa, another book, no? Like I said, puro Filipino authors yung halos lahat, no? Ipapakita ko sa inyo ngayon. This is another book, no? This is one of the best books in Philippine literature in English. Nanalo to ng National Book Award. Although hindi kasing sikat ni Lord yung author. Ang author nito si Ricardo M. de Ungria. I think siya ay head ng UP Davao, I think, I don't know, yun ang huli kong pagkakaalam. Pero si Ricky de Ungria, isa siya sa mga naging unang poetry teacher ko nung college. Kasi nung college, I was formally trained. Formal training to in writing poetry. So he was one of my first teachers, and this is one of his, or maybe this is considered his best book, no? Itong Decimal Places. English ito. Then, so another book by another friend. Ito, matanda na to. Parang lolo niya na to. Parang tatay ko na rin to. Si Jaime Anlim is a poet and a teacher. And gusto ko ang tulahan niya. Binili ko rin to. Hindi ko to hiningi sa kanya. I bought this book of his, yung Auguries. Na binili ko to after niya akong binibiro-biro ako dun lagi pag nakikita kami kasi yung mga tula ko raw bastos. Kasi sa my poetry kasi merong mga erotic images, erotic themes. Pero wala lang. Gusto niya akong asarin lagi pag nakikita kami. Bastos raw ng mga sinusulat ko. Pero hindi naman. Then, this is another friend of mine. Ito, internationally recognized na to, si Jim Agustin. Jim Pascual Agustin. He lives in South Africa. Pero Pilipino to. I think in South Africa, he's a teacher. Marami na tong awards, no? In South Africa, no? And in Europe, I think. So ito yung either ito yung pinaka-latest niya or this is, I think ito yung latest collection niya. How to Make a Salagubang Helicopter and Other Poems. Okay? Si Jim Pascual Agustin. Binili ko rin to. Okay? Sinusupport namin yung mga isa't isa bilang writers and friends. I'll also show you these other books. Kasi ako, personally, I've written 4 books of poetry. May iba pa akong sinulat na libro pero hindi na poetry yung iba eh. Pero yung libro ko na poetry, 4 yan. Show it to you. Galing akong public school So, hindi niyo pwedeng sabihin na pag nasa public school kayo hindi kayo maging writer or hindi kayo no. So, this is my first book ever, published in 1998. The 25th Fly. Tapos, pag biniliktad mo siya, 2-in-1 book siya. Kapartner ko, si Lord de Vera. So, sabay kami naglabas ng first books namin. Okay? Kasi uso yun dati, noong 1990s, dahil yung mga publishers dati, bago pa lang sila, di mo 1990s lang tayo, nagkaroon ng industry ng publishing na regular naglalabas ng books of poetry. Ganun katagal. 1990s, and to think, we were already a country 1900s. Diba? So, 90 years, nagkaroon tayo ng parang industry ng poetry publication. At kami ni Lord ang kasama sa mga unang na-publish ng panahon na yon. My second book is Tracks Without Giants. UST ang nag-publish nito. Okay? My third book, ang tawag, Textual Relations. Dito yung maraming erotic na iskandalo si Jaime Anlin nung binasa niya. Kaya inaasar ako palagi. Okay? Textual Relations. Sa cover, si Adam and Eve. No? And then, yung huling libro ng tula na nilabas ko, I think this came out 2014. So, it's about time maglabas na ako ulit. It's called Poison Nostalgia. Okay? Sabi ni literary critic Jamil Garcia, in a way, this is a landmark book because it's the first book daw na it discussed mental health and mental illness. Yung mga poems na to, no? About mental health, mental illness. Pero actually, hindi ito yung first book. Meron akong nakitang libro na una pa talagang. Ang author niya is a writer who's schizophrenic, no? Filipino. I have the book somewhere here, kaya lang hindi ko ba makita ngayon. So, ano makikita natin dito? Marami sa mga mahilig magbasa, eventually, nagsusulat. Lahat ng si Lourdes, ako, si Jim Agustin, si Ricky Di Ungria, lahat kami mahilig magbasa. Kasi syempre, pag nagbabasa ka, natututo ka, paano ba ang flow ng mga salita? No? Paano ba ang correct way ng paggamit ng salita na malinaw, na effective? So yung iba na mahilig magbasa, nagtatry sila magsulat. And some of them become good writers, di ba? They also become writers. But they never stop being readers. Kasi walang writer na pwedeng magtagal bilang writer na tumigil magbasa. Kasi input and output yan eh. Para ka rin kumakain. May energy ka, may lakas ka na gumawa ng mga bagay. Yun ang output mo. Pero ang input mo is yung pagkain. It's the same thing with your mind. Your mind, dapat laging may input yan. And usually the best input are books. Social media, hindi. Bakit? Kasi karamihan sa social media, karamihan ng nababasa niyan, hindi naman professional sa gumagawa. They are not trained to think. They are not trained to write. you have to think of social media as, yun nga, parang pagkain. Lahat ba ng pagkain maganda sa atin? May mga pagkain na nakakalason, may mga pagkain na pangit ang pagkaluto, may mga pagkain na puro na junk food, okay? Masarap pero walang sustansya. Sa social media, ganun din. Kaya dapat magbasa kayo ng mga authors na talagang recognized, trained to think, trained to write, trained to read. Parang sila yung mga, kung i-extend natin yung metaphor ng pagkain, parang sila yung mga kusinero. Marunong magluto ng pagkain na masarap, masustansya, ligtas, malinis. So, unahin mong kainin yung siniserve nila, no? Yung mga writings nila, yun ang unahin yung i-consume, no? Basahin. From time to time, mag-consume kayo ng mga junk food, junk food for the mind, mag-consume kayo na nasa social media, pwede naman. Pero wag puro ganon, di ba? Kasi magkakasakit yung utak nyo. Your minds will become sick, will become unhealthy. Parang ganon din yun. Okay? So, kaya kailangan ng critical thinking. You have to know, alin ba sa mga binabasa ko ang masama? Alin ba sa mga binabasa ko ang nakakabuti sa akin? Alin ba sa mga binabasa ko ang hindi totoo? Kasi pag hindi mo alam whether totoo o hindi ang binabasa mo, madali kang lokohin. Gusto nyo ba yun? Madali kayong lokohin? Madali kayong bulahin? Ayaw nyo yun, di ba? So, a little something about, kasi dahil nga ang specialization ko is poetry, no, for today. Although may iba rin akong ginagawa at sinusulat, I was asked to talk about poetry. Bakit ba importante ang poetry? Importante magbasa ng poetry. Actually, ang poetry ay hindi nagsimula sa pagbabasa. Because poetry existed before we had books. Mas matanda pa sa libro ang poetry. So poetry was chanted, it was memorized, it even had music. Ibang kultura, ang mga tula nila ay may musika. Kaya para rin silang kanta, no? Over the years, nang na-invento ang printing press, nailagay na si libro ang mga tula. Pero yung mga characteristic ng tula na nandoon nung hindi pa siya libro, nung siya ay kanta, siya ay chant, siya ay minimemorize, nandun pa rin. Hindi yun nawala. Kasi pag nawala yun, hindi na siya poetry. Kaya nga tinasabi natin, ang poetry, meron siyang meter. Okay? Meron siyang meter at in certain types of poetry, meron din siyang rhyme. Although hindi lahat ng poems may rhyme. Pero meter, which is sukat, meron ang tula. Lahat ng tula ay may sukat. Kahit yung sinasabi nilang free verse, na alam mo walang sukat, lahat yan sukat. Kasi yung sukat na yan ay kailangan. Bakit? Kasi nakakatulong yung rhyme and meter sa memorization. Hindi nyo papansinin nyo, yung mga kanta natin ngayon na naaalala natin kahit matagal na, yun yung mga kanta na may sukat at may rhyme. Kasi memory device ang mga yon. Dahil nga ang poetry, ideally, minimemorize. So yun ang doon. Ako, nung ako grade 4, inis na inis ako sa poetry. Grade 4 ako, grade 5. Kasi at the time, ako ay, campus writer na ako noon. I would write news, I would write essays, I would write creative essays. Hindi ko maintindihan bakit kailangan ko pag-aralan ang tula. Dahil feeling ko, nagagawa ng prose ko na hindi naman, nagagawa naman nila lahat ng nagagawa ng tula. Ganon. Oh. Pero, sa totoo, pag napag-aralan mo ng tula, hindi. Dahil merong mga nagagawa ang tula na talagang pang tula lang. Yun ang function kasi ng tula eh. Parang, in general, laging mas intense, mas powerful na experience ang tula. Dahil dinisenyo ang tula para maalala mo. Kahit hindi mo siya maalala sa utak mo, hindi mo ma-memorize ang mga linya niya, tatagos siya sa utak mo tsaka sa puso mo. Tatatak siya sa buong buhay mo. Yun ang purpose ng tula noon. Kasi nga walang internet, walang printing press. So lahat ng information na kailangan ng tribo, ng lipunan, nakastore yan sa tula. Storage device, information storage device ang tula nung ito ay nagsimula. Okay? Kaya lang yun na naging art form na siya later on. Okay. So, try natin. Ako ay magbabasa ng tula. Babasa ako ng tula ko. Pakinggan yung mabuti kasi nandoon yung demay. Nandun siya. Mararamdaman nyo, maririnig nyo yung sukat niya, yung ritmo niya, yung pattern. No? Hanap lang ako ng hindi mahaba. Ito pala, no? Isang example pa ng rhyme and meter, no? Kung meron kayong makikita sa internet o sa library nyo na kahit anong sonnet ni Shakespeare, si Shakespeare ang isa sa pinakamagaling, pinaka-expert sa rhyme and meter sa kanyang lengguwahe, sa English language. Ang pinakamadalas na meter na ginagamit ni Shakespeare ay yung tinatawag na iambic pentameter. Okay? Pentameter, bakit? Penta, 5. Merong 5 sukat yon. Ang iam ay accent, tinatawag natin yan, no? So, ang iam ay accent na pataas, 2 accent, pero isang level, isang taas. So, ang tunog niya is tata. Tata, 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 tata. Yun ang, pag napansin ninyo, karamihan sa English language, English literature na maganda, iambic pentameter siya. O iambic siya. Kasi hindi naman lahat 5 yung sukat. So, iambic siya karaniwan. Maganda siya pakinggan sa English. So, halimbawa, yung isang sonnet ni Shakespeare, yun, when in disgrace, with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone do weep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself, and curse my fate. Parang gano'n. Hindi yun yung buong sonnet. Pero sabihin, part of the sonnet is like that. So, musical siya, rhythmic, and it's beautiful to hear. Okay? Ngayon, I'll read something na, kasi meron akong tula na binasa. Dati, nung ako'y kolehiyo, when I was in college, I was formally getting training in poetry. Meron akong naisulat na tula na, syempre college, no? Mahilig ka manligaw. So, meron akong nililigawan noon eh. Ako kasi science major ako, no? Psychology major ako eh. So, meron akong na-inlove ako doon sa isang journalism major. So, nasa kabilang building siya. No? So, ginagawa ko, kasama sa panliligaw ko, tinutulaan ko. Tapos, one time, nung nasulat ko tong tula na to, tinawagan ko siya sa telepono. Tapos, binasa ko to sa kanya. Okay? So, anyway, ito yung napili kong tula ngayon. At saka nung high school, nung high school, magawa ko ng tula, pinagkakitaan ko kasi yung mga nanliligaw ko na kaklase na gustong mamigay ng tula sa nililigawan, ako gumagawa. O, 20 pesos yun, malaking pera na yun. 20 pesos yun, bawat tula. So, anyway, I'll share with you this poem. The title niya is Lady Tiger Jazz. Lady Tiger Jazz. Jazz music. Ito na siya. Again, I remember the flowers in the room where these words, like the soft, supple breath of flowers, are always escaping. The words which I would string into a blue garland for your neck, the words with which I would paint your portrait, the words with which I would chisel, strike, and crack, the memory of wood and stone to free your shape, smooth and naked as a fingernail. These words, which I launch like dark birds in the air, are still not enough. Somewhere, even as this shining moment perishes, you may be brushing your hair, or crossing the street, peering through shops, or checking your watch, and no longer prowl my heartland laid waste. I find that I myself must take on new shapes to lure you back. Become the cat crossing your path, a pair of earrings, cigarette smoke, or the pair of shoes on display, fish in a bowl, or be a drop of sweat sliding down between your breasts. Let me become the white bee, become the pink snails on a platter, become the skeletons of stars, stars, become the blue, blue butterflies. Let me be the church incense, be the fingers of your hand, be the crushed fruit and ice in your mouth. So yun, binasa ko yan sa telepono, di ba? Kasi niligawan ko eh. Maganda naman yung resulta. Kasi asawa ko na ngayon, tapos tapos 3 anak namin. Malay nyo, di ba? Nakatulong pala talaga yun. Anyway, I hope when I read it, na-sense nyo yung, na-detect nyo yung rhythm niya. Kasi yun pa lang, yun ang pinaka-importante eh. Ma-detect niyo yung pattern, yung rhythm, yung tugma at sukat niya, no? Detect niyo. So, sa ibang mga tula, pag nagbabasa kayo, try nyo yun. Basahin nyo out loud. Especially kung yung tula na talagang kilala na maganda, no? Like I said, sonnets ni Shakespeare, sa mga Filipino writers of poetry, maraming magagandang ang tunog niyan. Si Cirilo Bautista, no? Pag English, no? Virgilio Almario, pag Filipino. Pero mga matatanda na yun, yung mga teachers ko yun. So ngayon, marami ng iba pa na magagaling din na may enjoy nyo na mga gawa ng mga Pilipinong makata. Sa prose naman, may reading prose, pwede rin yun. Kasi merong mga nagsusulat in prose, short stories, essays, features. Merong mga kaya nila eh. Kaya ng mga writers ito gumawa na even yung prose nila may rhythm din. So yun, pag nakahanap kayo ng mga ganun, try to read it out loud. Mas may enjoy nyo yung binabasa nyo. Para bang binabasa mo siya, pero parang yung buong katawan mo yung ginagamit mo para basahin siya. Parang ganun. So, doon kayo magsimula. Kasi sa akin talaga pangit yung magsisimula ang isang bata sa pagbabasa na yung pinilit siya. Pinilit siya kasi project. Tama naman yun. Dapat naman. Kasi kung hindi kayo pipilitin, hindi kayo magbabasa totally. Pero on your own, kilalanin niyo ang pagbabasa bilang isang bagay na para sa inyo. Isang bagay na, isang sustansya, isang magandang bagay na ipapasok ninyo sa sarili ninyo para kayo mag-develop, no? Lalong mag-develop ang inyong kaisipan, imagination, empathy, compassion, critical thinking. pag nagbabasa kayo ng magandang babasahin, sarili nyo ang sarili nyo ang binibigyan ninyo ng kagalingan. Sarili nyo. So, yun, di ba? Mahalin nyo ang sarili nyo, magbasa kayo. Yun. Pa bang, tapos, kumbaga, gradually, habang tumatanda naman kayo, may mga babasahin na bagay sa edad nyo, merong hindi, merong walang pilitan. Piliin nyo yung mga babasahin na unang-una na i-enjoy nyo. Pangalawa, yung mga babasahin na, kasi may mga like I said, di ba? Parang pagkain. May pagkain na masarap, pero nakakasama. Magkaroon kayo ng guide. Yung mga mas matanda sa inyo, mga teachers ninyo, they can be your guides in choosing good books for yourselves. Yun. Kailangan ko magbasa ng kailangan ko magbasa ng ibang tula pa o ano. Sample pa tayo. Magbasa ng medyo sa high school ba meron ng biology? May subject naman na biology, di ba? So, sa mga tula kasi, kahit yung mga topics na scientific, pwede nang gawan. Kung maano na something na ito siguro. Ito, maiksing tula rin to na naisulat ko para sa isang kaibigan. Ito palang suggestion ko rin. Gusto yung ma-enjoy ang tula. Magbasa kayo ng tula. Kung may maganda kayong nabasang tula, kopyahin ninyo, padala nyo sa kaibigan nyo, gawin yung regalo. Pero huwag nyo aangkinin yung tula kung hindi kayo nagsusulat, ha? Ano yun? Masama yun. No? That's plagiarism. Masama yun. Pwede rin, pag nakapagbasa na kayo ng maraming tula, try nyo gumawa ng sarili nyo. Kasi ang pagtula naman, at when you start out, nanggagaya ka eh. In anything, whether you're a singer, manggagaya ka rin ng style ng ibang singer, sa simula, okay lang. You imitate. Basta huwag kayong magnanakaw ng gawa ng iba. Okay? So, meron akong kaibigan kasi nung college, ang lungkot ng buhay niya. Itong taong to, nung time na yon, maganda, sexy, matalino, medical student, may pera naman. Na malungkot. Malungkot ang buhay niya. Minsan sabi niya sa akin, ang lungkot ng buhay niya, tapos nade-depress pa siya kasi sa medical school, pag kayo ay nag-aaral mag-doktor, asahan na ninyo na isa sa mga examen ninyo, no? Bigyan kayo ng test. E ganito maniwala kayo sa hindi, totoo to. Kukuha kayo ng pusa. Okay? Yung pusa, patutulugin. General anesthesia. And then, hahatiin nyo yung pusa. Bubuksan nyo yung katawan ng pusa. Okay? And then, titingnan nyo yung organs sa loob ng katawan ng pusang yan. Habang naka-anesthesia siya, tulog siya. Tapos, pag natingnan nyo na, nasilip nyo yung mga organs niya, ibabalik nyo. Hindi nyo tatanggalin yung organs, ha? Sisilipin nyo na. Babalik nyo sa pwesto. Tatahiin nyo ulit, sasara nyo yung pusa. Ang test doon, dapat yung pusa nyo mabuhay. Kasi di ba, pinatulog nyo, inoperahan ninyo, ha? Sir, parang surgery, inoperahan ninyo. Sinara nyo ulit. Dapat mabuhay siya. Pag namatay yung pusa, bagsak kayo doon sa exam na yun. Ginawa yan, binanggit na sa akin ng kaibigan ko na yun, babaeng medical student, yung time na yun. Sabi niya, ang lungkot na nga ng buhay ko, tapos naawa pa ako dito sa pusa. Kumbaga, mabuti na lang yung pusa na naging examine niya. Nabuhay. Kaya lang awang-awa siya talaga. Kasi syempre, nagpapagaling yung pusa sa bahay niya, iyak ng iyak yung pusa. Kasi masakit yung mga sugat eh. Biniyak niya, tinahi niya, di ba? So, naawa ako sa kaibigan ko. Kasi kumbaga, ito yung kaibigan ko na single. Single pa kasi yung kaibigan ko ng time na yun. So, ginawa ko to sa kanya. Kasi, sabi ko, wala akong magagawa na single ka eh. So, tutulaan kita bilang isang handog ko sa iyo. So, ito naman yung ginawa ko tula, nasa wikang Ingles. Ano? Ang title ng tulang ito ay Pussy Poem. Kasi di ba may pussycat? Ito, parang binibigyan ko siya ng pussy poem. Itong tula na to na kahit hatiin mo to, hindi to mamatay. Okay? Para bang metaphorical, virtual type of pet. I gave her a pet in the form of a poem. Parang ganun. So, ito yon. Pussy Poem. I suppose by now, you would be hurt. Hurt because I have not written you the poem. Because I have failed you, you who tell me everything is fine and say, I go home to a cat. Because at first, I wanted to write a poem about a woman who comes home with groceries and realizes she bought more than enough. About a woman who looks into the mirror with deep, lost eyes. So instead, I tried to write a poem that makes its presence felt even when out of sight. By walking around, smoking and sizzling on the roof above your head at night. A poem that I wanted the poem to lick your fingers, rub itself on your back, and leave its prints all over your house, to lap up your milk and stretch itself with a thick, furry moan, a syrupy purr. I wanted the poem to curl itself around your ankles and rest its head with a yawn between your legs. I wanted very much to write, but think instead of a woman in the dark who stands singular and solemn as a candle flame, who sighs like a child, moves like honey in a bottle, and turns like a dancer in her bed. The woman whose face shines beneath a glass ocean, who, in the habits of days and weeks, forgets to paint her nails, sends postcards and calls her mother, and is surprised by her own voice when she speaks to herself in the silence. Yun po yung aking regalo na tula para sa aking kaibigan. Mahabang panahon na. Pero hanggang ngayon, gumagawa pa rin ako noon. Pag meron akong mga, pinopost ko sa Facebook iba, pag merong mga kaibigan ako recently na nagbo-birthday, gagawa ko ng tula. No? Ang maganda pa kasi sa ganun, pag ikaw mismo gumawa ng tula para sa kaibigan mo, para sa minamahal mo, napaka-unique ng regalo na yun. Dahil ikaw ang gumawa eh. Tapos ikaw ang tumula. Walang ibang makapagbigay sa taong yun ng ganung regalo, ikaw lang. Oh, di ba? So, in that sense, maganda siyang regalo. So, sana, makita niyo ang tula bilang regalo niyo sa iba. So, okay na siguro yon.
Yes po, sir.
Sana.
Ang dami po naming natutunan. maraming salamat po. Sa
Maraming salamat sa inyo.
Thank you po.
Mga bata, magbasa kayo ha. Huwag niyong pabayaan na lumipas ito na hindi kayo naengganyo magbasa. Gawin niyo para sa sarili ninyo. Maraming salamat.
Likha is a volunteer-led initiative advocating for community-based solutions in the Philippines. The group has an ongoing project to assist COVID-affected families. To send your support, visit the Likha Initiative Facebook page and look for Miss Dabs Bertolo. Thank you!
Ms. Aimee Morales, with the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines, would like to invite you to a literary and publishing trade discussion. Learn about editing and proofreading in Filipino and English this afternoon at 1 p.m. Just visit the Facebook page of the National Book Development Board for more details.
As a teacher, especially a language teacher, I should inspire my students to read and to love reading by being a good role model to them or by setting a good example to them. Make them realize the importance of reading, not only for pleasure or fun, but reading that will become beneficial to them. That through reading, they will be able to learn something new and relate to it. That through reading, they will be able to understand and accept more people around them. So make reading as their passion.
As teachers, we can adopt some ideas or take initiatives to motivate the students to read and help them develop a love for reading. Maybe we can hold reading challenges and competitions where students are given rewards to open a book. Instill in them the idea of reading for pleasure, where students are to read books from a wide range of genre or use articles from magazines and even stories from pocketbooks, for which they have to share insights out of their readings. Doing so entitles them to receive a simple token, the likes of ballpen, paper, or even pictures of their favorite Korean actors and actresses. Let them realize the great value of reading by telling them the more they read, the more they will know.
I will inspire my students to read by letting them experience and realize that reading is a lifetime and indeed a useful skill rather than a boring assignment. I will let them enjoy the fun in reading and embrace the fact that it will also help them in many aspects of their lives.
I can be a leader of readers by being a good reader. You cannot give something that you do not have, meaning you cannot be a leader of readers if you do not know how to read.
I can become leader of readers by inspiring students to love reading. Show them that I love reading by initiating ideas or projects that can motivate them and love reading by heart. Tell them the advantages that reading could give them. Through reading, we can become better thinker through the knowledge we acquire. Reading improves our communication skills, our vocabulary skills that we can use both in writing and reading.
I will become a leader of readers by inspiring authors through my personality and character, which were influenced by my passion in reading. If they see me as a living example of a reader by heart, as well as the benefits of reading in my life, I will lead them towards meaningful reading as well.
Today I am going to read the story of the Aged Mother, a Japanese folktale by Matsuho Basho. Long ago, in a tiny village in Japan, there lived a young farmer and his old mother. They lived well but simply until the cruel governor declared a wicked law. He said, "I have no desire for old people in my village. They are weak and cannot do work." The law was to put the people aging 75 years and above to be abandoned in the mountain. The cruel governor also added, "All who will disobey the law must be put to death together with their old relatives." This law made the young farmer very sad, for his mother was very old. Though he loved his mother, he must obey the governor. The young farmer carried his mother to the mountain with a heavy heart. On their way to the mountain, the mother dropped small twigs as markers to help her son get back. When the farmer bade farewell, she advised him to return home with the aid of the twigs. This made the son make up his mind to take his mother back home. Filled with dread, he hid his mother in his home. Their kitchen, where he keeps their food, became his mother's new place to live. Time passed, and the farmer was beginning to feel safe when the governor had announced a demand to all of the people that he wanted a rope of ash. Nobody in the village would make one. It was impossible. The farmer became anxious with the governor's demand, so he asked his mother if she knew how to make one. His old mother, filled with wisdom she gained from her years of living, had smiled to show her son that the governor's demand is not impossible. She said, "Son, make a rope from twisted straw." Then she added, "Stretch it in a flat stone and burn it there on a windless night." The farmer did what his mother told him, and amazingly it worked. He told the other villagers that he could make the governor's demand. Immediately the farmer was sent to the governor's place to show him the rope of ashes. The government became happy to see how smart people are from accomplishing a difficult task. To his joy, he asked the farmer where he got his wisdom. This made the farmer tremble in fear, and immediately bowed down to the governor, begging for forgiveness. The farmer had told him about his mother and how he was able to create the rope of ashes. The governor became silent and had thought deeply for a while. At that moment, he abolished his law on abandoning the old people. He would not kill the elders anymore because they had great wisdom. And that's all, and thank you for listening.
The Story of the Aged Mother, a Japanese folktale by Matsuo Basho. Long ago, in a tiny village in Japan, there lived a young farmer and his old mother. They lived well but simply until the cruel governor declared a wicked law. He said, "I have no desire for old people in my village. They are weak and cannot do work." The law was to put the people aging 75 years and above to be abandoned in the mountain. The cruel governor also added, "All who will disobey the law must be put to death together with their old relatives." This law made the young farmer very sad, for his mother was very old. Though he loved his mother, he must obey the governor. The young farmer carried his mother to the mountain with a heavy heart. On their way to the mountain, the mother dropped small twigs as markers to help her son get back. When the farmer bade farewell, she advised him to return home with the aid of the twigs. This made the son make up his mind to take his mother back home. Filled with dread, he hid his mother in his home. Their kitchen, where he keeps their food, became his mother's new place to live. Time passed and the farmer was beginning to feel safe when the governor had announced a demand to all of his people that he wanted a rope of ash. Nobody in the village could make one. It was impossible. The farmer became anxious with the governor's demand, so he asked his mother if she knew how to make one. His old mother, filled with wisdom she gained from her years of living, had smiled to show her son that the governor's demand is not impossible. She said, "Son, make a rope from a twisted straw." Then she added, "Stretch it on a flat stone and burn it there on a windless night." The farmer did what his mother told him, and amazingly it worked. He told the other villagers that he could make the governor's demand. Immediately the farmer was sent to the governor's place to show him the rope of ashes. The governor became happy to see how smart his people are from accomplishing a difficult task. To his joy, he asked the farmer where he got his wisdom. This made the farmer tremble in fear and immediately bowed down to the governor, begging for forgiveness. The farmer had told him about his mother and how he was able to create the rope of ashes. The governor became silent and had thought deeply for a while. At that moment, he abolished his law on abandoning the old people. He would not kill the elders anymore because they had great wisdom. The end.
Makato and the Cowrie Shell, a summary by Sufani Kanchanatiti. Once upon a time, there was an orphan whose name was Makato. He didn't have any ways to support himself, so he did every kind of work such as carrying heavy things, clearing away forests, and even feeding pigs. Although he was paid only a small wage, he never idled and satisfied of everything. As a result, people around him noticed his hard work and were very pleased of him. Makato dreamed of going on an adventure to a far and bigger place, where his land was fertile and the people were kind. He left his village and set out into the wide world. He walked along cheerfully, enjoying new insights and talking to the people he met on the way. After a long month's journey, he reached to the village on the boundary of the kingdom of Sukhothai. He met an old woman who helped her. He told her that he had come from a far place and he wanted to see the king, who he had heard was kind. He worked with the king's elephant and he started working for her. After some time working, he finally met the king. During the encounter, he picked up a cowrie shell that was lying on the road and offered it to the king. When Makato offered the shell to the king said he could have it. Makato was wondering what he could repay honor the king's gift. He saw some lettuce seeds at a stall in the market and thought that he could grow them. He asked the woman about them, and she let him have as many as he would stick to his finger for the return for his treasured cowrie shell. He made the lettuce grow abundantly. The next time he saw the king, he gave one to him and told him he grew them from the shell that he had given him. The king was very impressed and gave him a job in the castle. Eventually, Makato grew up and married the daughter of the king. The end. Makato and the cowrie shell. Thank you.
Bianca Iris M. Lapus, G.A. Eagle. Makato and the Cowrie Shell. A summary by Supani Kanchanatiti. Once upon a time, there was an orphan whose name was Makato. He didn't have any ways to support himself, so he did every kind of work such as carrying heavy things, clearing away forests, and even feeding pigs. Although he was paid only a small wage, he never idled and was satisfied of everything. As a result, people around him noticed his hard work and were very pleased of him. Makato dreamed of going on an adventure to a far and bigger place where the land was fertile and the people were kind. He left his village and set out into the wide world. He walked along cheerfully, enjoying new insights and talking to the people he met on the way. After a long month's journey, he reached the village on the boundary of the kingdom of Sukhothai. He met an old woman who helped her. He told her that he had come from a far place and he wanted to see the king, who he had heard was kind. He worked with the king's elephants, and he started working for her. After some time working, he finally met with the king. During the encounter, he picked up a cowrie shell that was lying on the road and offered it to the king. Cowrie shells were used for money, but just one was practically worthless. When Makato offered the shell to the king said he could keep it. Makato was wondering what he could repay to honor the king's gift. He saw some lettuce seeds at a stall in the market and thought that he could grow them. He asked the woman about them, and she let him have as many as would stick to his fingers in return for his treasured cowrie shell. He made the lettuces grow abundantly. The next time he saw the king, he gave one to him and told him he grew them from the shell that he had given him. The king was very impressed and gave him a job in the castle. Eventually, Makato grew up and married the daughter of the king.
This program is made possible through the effort of Orani National High School Main English Cluster in cooperation with the Art Theatre community.
Yung impression kasi nila nun, wala namang kikitain, hindi sustainable. Mas makakagawa tayo ng mga pagbabago sa industriya kung mas malakas din tsaka iisa yung boses natin.
Kung ako'y nasa grade 5, nagbigay ng assignment na magsulat daw kami ng tula. Nung sinabit ko yung assignment ko doon sa teacher, na nagalit siya sa akin. Sabi niya, bawal daw yung mangopya ng tula sa libro. So, imbes na malungkot ako, na-inspire kasi napagkamalan niya na kinopya yung isinulat ko. Simula noon, nahiligan ko na talaga yung pagsusulat ng tula.
Sa kolehiyo, natapos ko yung business administration sa University of Santo Tomas kasi yun yung ginusto ng magulang. Pero bumalik pa din ako sa pagsusulat.
At nag-masters din sa UP Diliman, creative writing, English poetry.
Dalawang gustong kong sinusulat, poetry at saka non-fiction.
Usually, print and online yung platform.
Meron akong libro, informational book for children, pero ma-appreciate din ng older readers. Tapos ngayon, ebook naman na lessons on writing. So yun lang yung una kong ebook na ilalabas mga middle of September. Although hindi ko masabing puro freelance kasi paminsan meron akong engagement na diretso with a company. Yung tuloy-tuloy na freelance ay siguro simula 2010.
Simula yung Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines around 2010, pero mas formal yung 2011. Sinimulan ko dahil sa mga sarili kong karanasan, mga struggles as a writer, para mas malakas ang boses ng mga manunulat na katulad namin. Nag-umpisa yung aming maliit na group, siguro mga around 8.
Nakaregister na siya sa Department of Labor and Employment.
Bakit nag-freelance ang isang manunulat? Iba-iba yung dahilan. May iba, meron silang karamdaman, nahihirapan silang pumasok sa opisina araw-araw. Yung iba naman ay nag-aalaga ng magulang. Yung iba naman ay mga nanay na madaming maliliit pang anak o may maliit na anak. Hindi lang talaga natutuwa sa traffic, sa pagko-commute. Minsan aabot ng 4 hours on the road to 6 hours na you could have been doing something else with that time, something more worthwhile. Hawak mo yung oras mo, mapipili mo kung ano yung mga projects na tatanggapin mo. So, you run your own business, you make your own terms, ikaw yung boss. Ang disadvantages naman, syempre wala kang regular na sweldo unless meron kang kliyente na nagpapayad regularly for regular projects. Disadvantage, wala kang benefits. Marami talagang affected ng pandemic. Yung ibang projects ay na-cancel, yung iba ay na-postpone. So, hirap talaga yung mga freelance writers na iba, no? Hindi naman lahat. Kaya ang ginagawa ng iba, nag-venture sa ibang larangan, kagaya ng online selling. Madaming plans ang guild. Merong 5 committees ang Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines. Ito yung Organization Development, Finance Committee, Media and Communication, Professional Standards, tsaka Advocacy and External Relations. Bawat isa sa mga committees na yan ay maraming mga naka-line up na proyekto. For example, yung Advocacy and External Relations Committee ay nakikialam doon sa ginagawang batas ngayon sa Kongreso, yung Freelancers Protection Act of 2020. So yung Professional Standards naman ay naglalayong gumawa ng national survey para makita yung totoong kalagayan ng mga freelance writers sa bansa. Napaka-importante po na tayo ay nagkakaisa. Ito ay isang imbitasyon sa lahat ng practitioners. You are a freelance writer working in the Philippines. I'm inviting you to join the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines para iisap ng mas malakas yung ating boses, mas mapapakinggan at magkakaroon ng mas mga permanenteng pagbabago sa ating industriya, sa ating komunidad.
I'm Aimee Morales. I'm a freelance writer and editor, and this is my voice on #WritersRights.
Happening now. Family reading with Miss Aimee Morales. Next and later.
Miss Aimee Morales. Miss Aimee Morales is a freelance writer, editor, and writing mentor. She is the founder of Flow, a community of writers who write for healing and inspiration. She started the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines in 2010 and served as president until September 2020. She has worked in advertising with Ogilvy One Worldwide, McCann World Group as a freelancer, among others, and as a consultant and freelance writer-editor for UNICEF, World Bank, Simea Inotech, Verlani Foundation, the United Nations Development Program, the Philippine Educational Theater Association, the Basis Conversion and Development Authority, the Southeast Asia Interdisciplinary Development Institute, and the Commission on Higher Education. As a feature writer, her work has appeared in the Philippine Star, Business Mirror, Rappler, GMA News Online, 8 List, Smart Parenting, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Lifestyle Asia, Health Today, My Home, Mega Magazine, among others. She taught briefly at the University of the East and is now practicing as an independent writing mentor to her small circle of writing proteges. She released her second book, Alignment, Lessons in Writing, in September 2020. Let's all welcome Miss Aimee Morales.
Hello, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Aimee at nagpapasalamat po ako sa invitation na para makapagbahagi ngayon ng maiksing talk para sa inyong buwan ng pagbasa. Siguro simulan ko sa isang kwento, no? Kasi ako po ay isang manunulat, simula pa nung bata ako, mahilig na talaga akong magsulat. Kaya lang nung college ay ang kinuha kong course business. Kasi yun yung gusto ng mga magulang ko. Pero after I graduated from college, dahil nga ang hilig ko naman talaga ay magsulat, ang hinanap kong trabaho ay may kinalaman sa writing pa rin. No? Usong-uso noon yung maghahanap ka ng trabaho sa dyaryo. So may nakita ako, isang araw, may nakita akong job ad, nakalagay, wanted, copywriter. So hindi ko alam kung ano yung copywriter. Pero basta't nandoon yung salita na writer, sabi ko siguro, pwede na to, may kinalaman siguro to sa writing kasi copywriter, may writer, no? So, nag-apply ako. Sinubmit ko yung aking resume doon sa company, tapos tinawagan ako. Nung interview na, chine-check niya yung resume ko, nagtatanong siya ng mga questions tungkol doon sa nakasulat doon. Tapos, meron kasing portion doon yung parang hobbies, gano'n. Nakita niya, mahilig ako magbasa. Andun yung, kasama yung reading sa mga hilig kong gawin. So, tinanong niya ako, anong gusto mong mga libro, ano yung binabasa mo ngayon, ano yung paborito mong book, sino yung favorite mong author. So, sinagot ko lang ng sinagot kasi mahilig nga ako talagang magbasa noon. As a writer, mahilig din ako talagang magbasa. So, kwentuhan lang kami about books and authors, ganyan. Tapos, in-explain niya kung ano yung trabaho. No? Copywriting, ibig sabihin pala noon ay yung pagsusulat para sa advertising. Yan. Alam ko na. Yung nangyari, tinanggap ako on the spot. No, after naming mag-interview, sabi niya, okay, you're hired, okay, when can you start, ganun. Tapos, syempre, ang saya ko. Nung mga, siguro ilang weeks into the job, after a while, at nakakapagkwentuhan kami ng boss ko na yun, nabanggit niya na kaya niya ako hinire kasi I'm a reader. Yun yung actually yung dahilan kasi in the first place hindi ko nga alam kung tungkol saan yung trabaho, 'di ba? Pero na-convince ko siya na siguro dahil mahilig ako magsulat, magbasa, mahilig ako sa mga salita, ay siguro naisip niya, siguro okay siguro itong mag-isip, ganon, articulate, magandang communication skills. Kasi sa totoo lang, kabit-kabit yun no? So yun yung point ng aking maiksing kwento na sa ngayon, halos lahat ng mga trabaho ay nagre-require ng reading skills. Kasi syempre, babasahin mo yung mga email sa'yo. You have to make sense of reports, mga memo, mga kung ano pang mga sulatin na kailangan mong basahin may kinalaman sa trabaho. No? So, yun yung unang point. No? Importante ito dahil kailangan natin sa kahit anumang klaseng trabaho, kahit walang kinalaman sa
sa writing o sa reading, sa communication, ganun. Pangalawa, mahalaga ang pagbabasa kasi tinutulungan tayo nito na makapag-communicate ng mas mabuti at mas malinaw sa ibang tao. Yun yung second point. No? Ang third na gusto kong i-emphasize ngayon ay ito ay halaw dun sa isang pag-aaral na ginawa ng Oxford University. Ito ay isang kilalang at malaking universidad sa England na ayon sa study na kanilang ginawa ay mas magaganda daw umano ang mga trabahong nakukuha ng mga tao na merong mataas na reading skills o yung mga taong mahilig magbasa. So, ayan, tandaan natin at isa-isip kung bakit kailangan i-develop natin yung reading habit at saka pataasin natin yung ating reading skills habang tayo ay bata pa. Paano naman, alam ko na yung iniisip ng iba sa inyo, no? Paano naman, ayaw ko talaga magbasa. I hate to read. Hindi ko hilig yan. Naaantok ako. Wala akong panahon. Nabubore ako. Alam mo, madaming ganon. No? Lalo na sa mga kabataan. Hindi talaga, wala na silang tiyaga at interes para kumuha ng libro, buklatin ito at magbasa. Isa lang ang masasabi ko dyan. Yung mga sa mga ganong bata siguro na magsasabi na I hate to read, alam nyo, hindi nyo pa nahahanap lang ang libro na para sa inyo. Yun. Siguro yung mga nahahawakan nyo, mga may kinalaman sa mga bagay na hindi naman kayo interesado. So, hanapin nyo kung ano yung interest ninyo at yun ang pag-umpisahan ninyo sa pagbabasa, sa pagpapalawak ng inyong karanasan as far as reading is concerned. Ano ba yung hilig nyo? Saan ba kayo na-excite? Kahit na, for example, video game, di ba? Meron kang particular video game na gusto o kaya movie na napanood mo o papanoorin mo, balak mong panoorin, you can start from there. Kung meron siyang book version, subukan ninyong magbasa ng libro na tungkol doon sa movie na yun. Counted naman ang graphic novels, ang comics, kahit anong sulatin, kahit nga yung balutan ng chichirya, no? Kung yun ang type mong basahin, pwede. Basta simulan lang ang practice at ang habit ng pagbabasa, okay na yun, no? Kung ano yung talagang hilig mo, yun ang basahin mo. Naalala ko noong bata ako, bago pa akong matutong magsulat, maliit pa talaga, like siguro 3 years old, hindi pa ako nag-aaral. Ako mismo ang nagturo sa sarili kong magbasa. Hindi ako tinuruan ng, alam niyo kung paano. Kasi, dati, may comics na, hindi ko maalala yung pangalan ng comics, pero merong, strip, hindi naman strip kasi medyo mahaba eh. Ang title niya ay Niño Bonito. Yan. Siguro yung ibang kaedad ko dyan makaka-relate kung maaalala kung ano yung Niño Bonito. Paborito ko yung tignan lang kasi hindi pa ako marunong nga magbasa. So, tuwing hapon, nandun ako sa kwarto ng lola ko. Tinitignan ko yung comics. Yung mga litrato, yung pictures, yung images, tinitignan ko. Tapos gusto ko talagang malaman kung ano yung kwento kasi kulang. Dahil hindi ko nga mabasa yung mga letra. Ang liit ko pa nun. Pero very interested ako doon sa nangyayari, doon sa galaw ng mga characters. Bata yun eh. So, ang ginawa ko, dahil gusto ko talaga maintindihan, nire-recognize ko yung mga letra, tinatanong ko yung lola ko, ano ba itong nakasulat? Ano ba itong sinasabi dito? Anong letra ba to? Tapos naaalala ko siya. No, kapag sinabi niya sa akin, ito yung letrang ganyan, natatandaan ko yon at tuloy-tuloy lang ako sa pagtingin doon sa comics. Eventually, unti-unti, natutunan ko yung ilang mga salita. Tapos, naging familiar ako sa, doon sa mga words at natuto ako magbasa. Doon ako umpisa natuto magbasa sa comics. So, kayo din, no, kung ano yung interest ninyo, doon tayo mag-umpisa. You don't have to start with boring textbooks. Pero kung as long as mahihikayat nito ang inyong interest and magiging habit sa inyo, yun, doon tayo mag-umpisa. Para naman sa mga magulang, kasi kung gusto nating suportahan ang ating mga anak sa kanilang pagbabasa, sa kanilang efforts, no, na mas dalasan ang pagbasa, importante po na meron tayong library sa bahay. Yan. Hindi, anong babasahin nila kung wala namang libro sa bahay natin, di ba? So, kailangan may libro po sa ating tahanan. At pag sinabing home library, hindi naman kailangan na sobrang dami ng libro na nandoon na bibili kayo, gagastos kayo ng napakamahal. Alam nyo, ang kahit na 20, at least 20 books lang, yung home library ninyo, okay na yun. Pwedeng-pwede na yun. Meron ako ditong ano bang tawag dito? Fact, no? Galing sa isang research din na nagsasabi na yung mga bata na merong home library sa bahay nila ay meron daw dagdag ng katumbas ng 3 taon sa eskwela. I mean, in terms of their knowledge, yung kaalaman. No? An additional 3 more years of schooling kumpara doon sa mga batang walang home library. So, mahalaga na i-set up natin ito para sa kanila. Kahit po konti-konti, mabuti lang na meron silang madadampot. No? May libro sa ating tahanan. At pangalawa, para sa mga magulang pa rin, importante din na minomodel natin yung behavior. Ibig sabihin, ay makikita nila na tayo rin ay nagbabasa. No? Kasi yan yung imitation, 'di ba? Gumagaya din yung ating mga anak sa atin, sa mga ginagawa natin, sa ugali natin, sa habits natin. So kung nakikita nilang we're regularly reading something, diaryo man yan, comics o magazine, okay na yun. At least nabomodel natin yung habit, yung behavior sa ating bahay. Ang sabi, ito another fact ito, no? Kung magbabasa po kayo ng at least 6 minutes a day, every day, no, ay mababawasan ang stress level ninyo ng 68%. Oh, 'di ba? Nakaka-relax pa siya, nakakatulong sa ating mental health. Lalo na panahon ngayon, medyo mahirap. So, gawin nating pastime, siguro hobby ang pagbabasa bilang isang pamilya. At yung mga meron namang maliliit na bata, baby pa, yung mga maliliit na mga anak, umpisahan nyo na habang bata pa sila na masanay na binabasahan sila ng storybooks. Kasi kung babasahan mo ang anak mo ng isang storybook, kahit yung mga maninipis lang na mga Adarna na storybooks, children's books, picture books, kung babasahan mo sila ng libro every night,
tuwing gabi, pagdating nila ng 5 years old, ay nabasahan mo na sila ng 1,825 books. O, diba? Ang daming libro na nun. So, yun po yung mga tips ko para sa mga mag-aaral, sa kabataan natin, mga estudyante, at saka sa mga nanay. Ngayon naman, punta tayo sa mga teachers. Yan, sa mga teachers naman dyan, ating mga kaguruan. Ang mga bata daw, no, ayun pa rin sa mga pag-aaral, ano, na merong classroom library ay mas doble ang panahon na ginugugol sa pagbabasa kumpara doon sa mga bata na walang classroom library kasi wala silang syempre access sa libro, madaling access, no, kasi everyday nasa classroom sila. I mean, assuming, no, na post-pandemic na panahon na babalik na sa classroom yung ating mga estudyante. Maganda na merong classroom library yung ating mga bata. Yung mga libro na dadalhin natin doon sa classroom, pwedeng mag-start tayo ng donation drive galing sa mga parents, no? Kung sino mang magulang dyan, may extrang book sa bahay na pwedeng i-share sa classroom ng kanilang mga anak, pwede nila i-donate yun, no? Para lumaki yung ating classroom library. Pangalawa, pwede rin tayong magkaroon ng parang book drive, di ba? Meron siguro kayong social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Pwedeng tayong mag-announce na kailangan natin ng mga donation na libro na babasahin para sa ating mga mag-aaral. No? Pwede rin tayong bumili sa mga garage sale, book sale, mga online bargain, yan yung mga sources ng libro na pwede nating ilagay doon sa ating classroom library. Pangalawang idea na pwedeng gawin ng mga guro ay yung magkaroon ng parang book club o kaya classroom reading club, yan, o kaya book talk na regular sessions sa inyong classroom. Kwentuhan lang, ano bang binabasa mo ngayon, hayaan nating mag-share yung mga estudyante natin kung ano nga yung binabasa nila, ano yung masasabi nila doon sa libro na binabasa nila, sharing lang, discussion. Siguro kahit na once a week, pwede natin gawin yan. Tapos, another idea ay kung tuwing umaga, halimbawa after prayers or bago mag-umpisa ang klase, pwede tayong magkaroon ng parang quiet reading time. Ito yung tinatawag na independent reading, na hayaan lang natin silang magbasa. Hindi siya structured na reading time, ano. So, pwede rin naman ito once a week kung meron kayong free na period. It doesn't have to be very long, siguro kahit 30 minutes, 15 minutes, bigyan natin ng panahon yung mga bata na magkaroon ng quiet reading time sa sarili nila. Kung merong libro doon sa classroom library o may dala silang libro, yun na lang yung basahin nila. Tapos maganda kasi ang independent reading daw, ang sabi pa rin ng mga researchers ay kaugnay siya, no? Nauugnay siya sa mas mataas na reading achievement, no? So, kung regularly talaga silang nahahasa na magbasa sa bahay at sa eskwela, dahil merong regular period for independent reading, mas maganda yun para sa kanila. Masasanay sila talagang maging habit yung reading at i-incorporate sa kanilang buhay. And the final tip or advice, guro, dun sa mga parents, teachers, ay yung pwede nating bigyan yung mga estudyante natin ng parang challenge. For example, read for 21 minutes
for 21 days. Example lang, no? 21-day challenge na para mabuo yung habit, no, sa kanila. Kasi ang sabi doon sa may computation, no, na data na nahanap ko sa internet, kung magbabasa ka daw ng 20 minutes a day, every day, sa isang taon, ay makakabasa ka ng 1.8 million words. Diba? Tapos, kung ang isang bata na nakakapagbasa ng 1 million words a year, ay ayon sa pag-aaral, ay kabilang siya doon sa top 2% in terms of reading achievement. So, yun po yung mga paraan, no, kung paano natin pwedeng ituro ang pagbabasa o mahikayat ang ating mga estudyante, ang ating mga anak na gawing habit ang reading. Kasi katulad nga ng nasabi ko kanina, importante siya, no? Hindi lang sa eskwela, kung hindi kahit na sa buhay natin after school, after we graduate, kung anumang field o industry o trabaho ang ating pasukan, ay mahalaga ang reading skills, no? So, yun lang po siguro ang mababahagi ko sa inyong lahat ngayong araw na to. Maraming salamat ulit sa paanyaya sa akin, at sana po ay yun, tuloy-tuloy po nating tayong magbasa sama-sama sa pamilya, sa classroom, no? At saka meron po pala akong hinanda na parang handout para sa inyo na i-distribute ng paaralan para sa mga magulang, sa mga participants ngayong sa event na ito. Nandun po nakasummarize yung lahat ng sinabi ko ngayon. So, kung hindi po kayo nakapag-notes, okay lang kasi nakalista doon. Sana po itago ninyo at sana makatulong po sa inyong pagtuturo o pagpapalaki sa inyong mga anak. At yun, maraming salamat ulit at magandang araw po sa inyong lahat.
Likha is a volunteer-led initiative advocating for community-based solutions in the Philippines. The group has an ongoing project to assist COVID-affected families. To send your support, visit the Likha Initiative Facebook page and look for Ms. Dabs Bertolo. Thank you!
Ms. Aimee Morales, with the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines, would like to invite you to a literary and publishing trade discussion. Learn about editing and proofreading in Filipino and English this afternoon at 1 p.m. Just visit the Facebook page of the National Book Development Board for more details.
As a language teacher, I should inspire my students to read with passion and joy. Show them that reading is fun, that when they read, they experience to travel back in time, go to places they've never been or even dream of, and be the character they read. Most of all, show them that reading is useful. It improves their vocabulary and they will acquire information. Tell them that the more they read, the more they learn, the more places they will go and discover. In short, reading will broaden their horizon.
Some say that reading is their passion, and some say that reading is their interest and hobby. But the question is, how much do you really read? As a teacher, in order to inspire the students to read, I should also be a leader of readers and be the reader myself. How? I could engage my students in reading sessions even once a week. Also, I could tell the students to find values, to appreciate what they are reading. And also, I could tell them that the authors could be their friend. Why? Because they could find connections between their experiences and the author himself. That's why we develop our favorite authors and writers, as well as the stories that they had written. To become the leader of readers, being a leader requires an action in order for the people to follow you.
To become a leader of readers, it should start in myself. Being a leader requires an action for the people to follow us. So what am I gonna do with that? I will have some different strategies and methods in order to address the different problems of my students in reading. Because if I address that, that is where they are going to find interest in reading, and that is where they are going to gain wisdom and share the experiences to others. And for me, as a teacher and a leader, I could pass it to my students, and the students could also be a leader himself and can help the people or some students who have difficulty in reading.
How to become a leader of readers? To become a leader of reader, one must read a lot. Leaders become leaders because they read about everything and anything. It improves their analytical skill so they have better judgment. To become a leader, one must have good communication skills, and they can acquire it through reading.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on the way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Fantasy of my inspiration. I'm a normal teenage fan of yours, whose mind and heart is always thinking of you. You who will never know who I am, because it's so impossible to meet you. Growing older with your songs and shows is one of the best moments on my life. Your songs that give me inspiration, shows that keep me away from my anxiety and depression. Even I'm just a stranger to you, I want to meet and see you. You might be real or not real, but my feelings for you will always be surreal. Instead of blaming you for being in my heart and mind all the time, I want to thank you for giving me happiness. And through my hard times gave me reasons to live. Like a rainbow, you brought magic into my life. I don't want to wake up in this dream because I always want to feel that you are real. Yes, you're just a word of my fantasy, a fantasy that I want to turn into reality.
Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit, from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shades. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
In order to inspire our students to read, we must let them see that we read too. Talk about with them the books that we are reading. Help them see the importance of reading. To become leader of readers, we must lead by example. Before we can make them read, reading should be seen to us first. That way, we can be their role model.
Teachers play an important role in inspiring our students to read. Let us help students see the importance of reading. Laying out the benefits of reading may be one of the best ways to encourage students to pick up books on their own.
I inspire my students to read by sharing with them the learnings I have gained in reading
as well as the fun and adventures. And I tell them that when they read, they should go beyond words, that there is something more than just reading a line that they have to discover. A good reader makes a good leader. Through reading a lot, especially the life of successful people, I am able to imitate their experiences and apply it in my work environment, hoping so much that I could also imitate their success. Reading also teaches me to communicate effectively. That gives a positive impact toward my colleagues and learners as well. And that is how reading shapes me to be a leader of readers.
Inspiring the love of reading among our students is a tough job because these people are digital natives, so they have different experiences and different interests. And most of them do not have the means and access to good reading materials. Besides, no one probably ever told them what and how to read, so they find reading boring. So what I do is I bring interesting reading materials, stories inside the classroom, read it to them myself, and engage them in a meaningful discussion. Sometimes I even prescribe what they have to read. I explicitly tell them titles of books and poems and even magazines and comic strips that I love reading. I share with them links and portals that I have ebooks also that I share with them that I have acquired over time. I do this because I want to share with them my passion and the same enthusiasm I feel when I am reading. So I think that's it. If we provide them with sufficient access to sources of good literature and reading materials, we also broaden their horizon. We open the doors of these students towards a starting point in their journey towards reading. So let's walk our talk, embrace reading, and pass it on.
To bait fish with all. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He had disgraced me and hindered me 500,000. Laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, hated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew.
Hath not the Jew eyes? Hath not the Jew hands? Organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt by the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer, as a Christian is.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility?
Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why? Revenge. The lie you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction.
To bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me, and hindered my 500,000. Laugh at my losses, mock at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, and heated mine enemies. And what is his reason? I am a Jew.
Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands?
organs, dimensions, senses, passion, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject with the same disease, healed with the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer, as a Christian is.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
If we are like you, the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge.
If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why? Revenge. The villa you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction.
He hath disgraced me, and hindered me 500,000. Laughed at my losses, mocked my gains, scored my nation, thwarted my bargains, called my friends, hated my enemies, and what is reason? I am a Jew. Had in a Jew eyes, had in a Jew hands, organ, dimension, senses, affection, passion, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapon, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same mean, warm and cold by the same winter and summer as a Christian is.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge? If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be? By Christian example. Why revenge? The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will be better the instruction.
Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to read to you my favorite part of the story, The Soul of the Great Bell. At last came the awful day when the third and last effort to cast the great bell was to be made, and Komai, together with her waiting woman, accompanied her father to the foundry, and they took their places upon a platform overlooking to the toiling of the molders and the lava of liquefied metal. But ere ever he lifted his finger, a cry caused him to turn his head, and all heard the voice of Komai, sounding sharply, sweet as bird song above all the great thunder of the fires. For thy sake, O my father! And even as she cried, she leaped into the white flood of the metal. Then the father of Komai, wild with his grief, would have leaped in after her, but the strong men held him back and kept firm grasp upon him until he fainted away, and they could bear him like one of dead to his home. But in spite of all these things, the command of the celestial August had to be obeyed, and the work of the molders to be finished. Hopeless as the result might be, yet the glow of the metal seemed purer and whiter than before, and there was no sign of the beautiful body that had been entombed therein. So the ponderous casting was made, and lo, when the metal had become cool, it was found that the bell was beautiful to look upon and perfect in form, and wonderful in color above all other bells. Nor was there any trace found of the body of Komai, for it had been totally absorbed by the precious alloy and blended with the well-blended brass and gold, with the intermingling of the silver and iron. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Bookmark Creatives. In this creative activity, all students crafted bookmarks which they personally conceptualized. The bookmark designs included their favorite lines from poems, quotations, and Bible verses. Already National High School Maine believes that everyone and anyone can be a leader of readers. All learners and school personnel joined the activity, sharing a photo of them reading their favorite storybook, comic strips, and magazines.
This program is made possible through the effort of Orani National High School Main English Cluster in cooperation with the Art Teatro community.
We would like to thank the following personalities and institutions: Sir Ben Loory, Miss Aimee Morales, Sir Ramil Gulle, Sir Audie Roque, Mr. Richard Avila, Miss Arlene Samonte, Miss Arlene Matilde, Miss Vina Cunanan, Miss Susan Claire Agbayani, Miss Gina Lumawig, Miss Beverly Sy, Undersecretary Elaine Pasqua, Seasonal Writer M&J, Cultural Center of the Philippine Batang Sini, and CCP Intertextual Division.